Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Adequate notice of this meeting, as required by the Open Public Meetings Act, was provided through the posting, mailing, and filing of the annual notice of regularly scheduled meetings of the Town Council on December 12, 2023. The notice was, on that date, posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, provided to the Westfield Leader and the Star Ledger, and filed with the clerk of the town of Westfield. Ms. Loshing, may I have a roll call?
Mayor Brindle?
Here.
Councilmembers Hapgood?
Here.
Dardia?
Here.
Domagala?
Here.
Kiefer?
Here.
Saunders?
Here.
Armento?
Here.
Contract?
Here.
Healy?
Please rise for the invocation, which will be given by Councilman Domagala, and remain standing for the salute.
We meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, and to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognize our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and the needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek support on our deliberations and our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well.
So before I have Jim come up and give comments, we do have a proclamation for Red Ribbon Week. They're not here. I just want to say thank you to our Board of Health, who actually supports this types of programs. Red Ribbon Week is intended to bring awareness about drug prevention and drug-free lifestyles in our communities, and it is the week of October 23rd through 31st. So I just want to acknowledge that proclamation, and it will be read into the public record. With that, I'm going to ask Jim to come up, give an update.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. A couple of quick things for the public and the council. Reminder, leaf collection actually started this week. If you remember two weeks ago, we talked about leaf collection starting earlier. We actually identified a number of streets in town where leaves are already down in very large numbers. So we started picking up heavy areas this week. We expect to finish that by Friday. Next week, we will actually start 1 week earlier than normal, the normal sequential collection, which will start in Zone 2 and Zone 7. And they will follow along. Reminder, a couple things to be reminded of. If you want leaf bags for bagging leaves on your property, you can get them for free at the Conservation Center. Conservation Center is now open earlier than normal for the leaf season. Two, street sweepers this year, instead of actually coming at the end of the leaf collection process, will be with the leaf collection crews as they do their leaf collection, so we can clean up the roads at the same time or right after collections are done on the street. And lastly, if you're not signed up for Nixle yet, please do. We'll be sending out on a daily basis Nixle alerts, letting you know where we're going to be the next day. So if we know you're going to be on your street, in your area, please move your cars, allow our crews to get out there. But again, I want to thank Craig Gibson, our Public Works Director, and Rich Eubanks for accommodating the earlier start this year. The crews were out there this week doing the work. Lastly, just a reminder too, we will be doing 6 Saturdays, which start November 9th. Normally the Saturdays are dedicated to school areas because those are areas we can't get to during the week. But if we get those done, we'll move on to other areas too. So again, the goal is to get these leaves up and off the street as soon as possible. And right now with the warm weather and no rain, leaves are falling earlier. So second part, just a reminder, taxes, fourth quarter taxes due November 1st. Again, 10-day grace period. And thank you to all the residents that have already paid. Three other things. So one, on the agenda tonight, we have a parking, an ordinance to award a contract for parking management technology. We spent quite a bit of time through the Public Safety Committee this year doing some research on parking companies. This is basically going to be an award of contract for software to help us custom design a system for us that will be able to get our parking commuters, residential, and employee permits renewed online payments, online renewals, no more paperwork, but most importantly, waitlist management system, so residents who are on the wait list can go and check the wait list on their own rather than have to call the office. And also daily pass sales. Right now, for those that buy daily passes, you know the process. You go and see Helen or Rob at the lot at 6:45, 7 o'clock in the morning. You say hello to them, you give them your cash, and you get your permit for the day. It's very nice hometown touch, but I want to make it easier for residents. We're going to start an online daily pass opportunity. So all these items, if it's awarded tonight, will be custom designed. We'll roll this out next year. The other part of this award tonight is license plate reader software for the parking department, so that when they enforce permits and so forth in the lots or 2-hour zones on street, it's much easier to enforce. Right now, you have to take pictures, chalking of tires, a lot of heavy labor-intensive items. So again, thank you to the council in anticipation of having approval tonight to get that going, and we'll spend the next number of months designing that software with the company. Two last things, paving. Reminder of paving, again, we've had a great year of paving, both not only the town's work, all of our roads are done with the exception of 3 roads. That's Clover and Francis as part of one state aid project, and a section of Elm between Dudley and East Broad Street is another state aid project. Our engineer has submitted the documents to the state. We did just get approval from the state on the Clover and Francis project, so he's going to try to get that out to bid in the next few weeks. We may have a shot at getting that section done this year. Worst case, it'll be done in the spring of '25. And Elm Street, we're still waiting the state's response. But our program will be done once those 3 roads are done. On the Elizabethtown gas side, they have had significant paving this year. They are planning to do 2 areas of paving, probably starting late next week into the first week of November. There's a school holiday first week in November. They're trying to capitalize on that to actually pave a section of Broadway Avenue between West Broad and by the high school, in front of the high school, Waterson Street, and a section of Trinity Place. Those are 3 areas that are scheduled for later in the week of November 1st. And the other areas we're trying to finish up is the second grid of the Coolidge area, which includes Fair Acres, Harding, Salter, Fourth, Marcellus, Castleton, St. Mark's, and Sherbrooke. So if they're able to do that in the next couple of weeks, they will have basically 90% of what they proposed this year to be done. The last section that will not be done yet this year, which they thought would be done, was the Kimball Avenue grid. They still have to do their infrastructure work there. But again, we've had over 80-plus roads touched in this town this year between the town and Elizabethtown Gas, and I think pretty good results. The last thing I want to do is just talk about the new street sign program. Talked about this a few months ago. We spent a lot of time behind the scenes with Public Works working on this. Again, this year's capital budget allowed the Public Works Department to buy some new sign equipment and software and technology for their sign department. So we have started, actually it started yesterday. The town, for this purpose, the town was broken into 50 small areas, about 25 zones on the north side, 25 on the south side. And we've decided to do is start on the very far end of the north side and the very far end of the south side. So for example, yesterday, we had signed new street signs, replacement street signs put up in the Trails End Court, Madison Avenue, Overhill, Sedgwick area, starting that very far corner of the town. And on the south side, today, started at Virginia, Maryland, Grandview area. And we will begin that process. So we're going to have a map that will be posted to our website very soon. It will show the zones, and each zone will be cross-hatched when it's completed, so people can follow along in the process. And what this entails is, we'll show and tell here. So this is an example of a very old street sign that was just replaced, Madison Avenue. Green signs, white letters, old style, fades, not very reflective. This is representative. I'll show the public as well. Everyone's seen these around town. So we are changing that, and you see the size of the font. This is the new version, double-sided, so much larger. Yeah, much larger, bigger fonts, more reflective. This is also a public safety initiative. We get a lot of complaints about street signs being faded, some missing. So what Public Works is going to be doing now, starting yesterday, they'll be going out. Some of the street signs are very easy to replace. Sign comes off, new signs go up. Easy. Some signs, though, are covered by tree branches. Some signs might be in the wrong place. Well, I know there was one that's in the middle of a handicap ramp, but we're going to move those. So when they get to each grid, they're going to go through each area. If sign pole has to be removed, replaced, if something's bent, if there's branches covering something, whatever it may be, new signs will go up. There's over 1,400 signs that have to be replaced. Part of those signs are signs on county roads. This template here, their larger sign plate, larger font, and the white border for reflectivity is the same template the county uses on their roads. And we've talked to the county already, and they have indicated they will give us approval to replace all the signs on their road that cross-section our road. So, for example, Lamberts Mill Road, Mountain Avenue, Central, etc. We will replace all the signs with the same thing. All these are being done in-house with our own sign equipment. And so we will now have much better maintenance. If something gets hit by a car or a truck, we'll be able to go out literally next day and replace these. and this is all saved, so we have a consistent sign program going forward. So again, Public Works is very excited about this. I want to thank Craig Gibson, Public Works Director, Eugene Watkins, our road supervisor, Allison, and well, Eugene's not here anymore, but the staff that designed this, worked on the technology program, and is in the process of doing this. So a lot more to come. One last thing to mention, we'll get more details on this as time goes on. Our goal is to take all the older signs that come down. People may want these for their basements, man caves, she sheds, whatever it may be. We were going to work out a process to make sure it's legally approved to auction them off. And the money we get from that, we actually talked about going to a local, a town committee to offset some of the budget costs. Things like Public Arts Committee, for example, has been talked about. We'll decide that at a later time. But again, very exciting program, and people will start seeing this all over town, but it's going to take some time as Public Works does their normal work, but they will get this in, and signs have already started going up. So again, thank you for letting us purchase the equipment and letting us do this, and I know that I think this is a nice branding opportunity and public safety brand opportunity for the town. So that's my update. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Jim and I have been talking about those signs since 2020. We thought we were going to be able to do it for our 300th anniversary, and then COVID happened, and anyway, and here we are, so it's great. So I have some remarks to make before we get into the agenda tonight, so bear with me because there's a lot to talk about, so and it's important, so I don't want to rush through it. But there is one thing I want to bring everyone's attention to because it's something that this council started talking about in January, and that was on Friday, Governor Murphy signed a crime bill into law that increases penalties for home invasions and addresses juveniles that commit them. The new law, luckily, was passed with overwhelmingly bipartisan support in the legislature. I think there was one no. Upgrades the type of robberies we've seen in Westfield to a felony, where criminals break into homes in search of car keys, which is now considered the equivalent to a home invasion under the new law. So believe it or not, when they broke in for car keys, it wasn't a home invasion. So now it is. It also extends prison time for people who are convicted of invasions and burglaries and possession of a deadly weapon. And very importantly, allows teens 15 years or older to face prison sentences up to 20 years for committing those crimes. Because what's happening, those crime ringleaders in Newark are using juveniles to commit these crimes because there are very few consequences. Now there are if they're 15 and older, which is great. So we've been talking about this, I think, since early January, looking for the right bill to support. I had been leveraging my role on the executive board of the New Jersey League of Municipalities to express support and had been providing relevant information to the sponsors from Westfield, including even the ring video footage from the recent break-in on Dudley. So obviously more can be done to address crime, but really I know the chief is very happy about this, and we hope that this serves not only as a deterrent for criminals, but empowers our police department to arrest and detain those who are caught committing these crimes. On Friday was a big day. I had the privilege of swearing in 3 probationary firefighters, which brings the fire department staffing to the highest level in 17 years. Congratulations to probationary firefighter Brandon Jory, probationary firefighter Raymond Lestarchik, and probationary firefighter Matthew Egan, and wish them safe and rewarding careers with the Westfield Fire Department. And I just felt old because some of them were classmates of my daughter, so that's when, you know, you're old. And just to remind everybody, I don't know if anyone was in town on Sunday. It was crazy with Adams Fest and everything. There were people everywhere, lines out all the stores. It was terrific. So, and the weather, of course, has been fabulous. So Adams Fest is in full swing. Big lineup this week. Wicked Windows obviously are downtown. There's that Be Wicked Witch selfie stop on the train station lot. And there's, don't forget to cast your vote on the Haunt Your House contest. And the art exhibit, which is in the former Nos Vinos space on Central Avenue, is a great exhibit where Charles Adams' original work is there. And of course, everybody is waiting for Charlie's Ale Garden, which returns this Saturday to the Armory. And I think there's going to be some new information about that tomorrow, right, Kim? Yes, so be on the lookout for some announcements about Charlie's Ale Garden. Also a very popular event at Brightwood Park, where the Westfield Recreation Department and the Friends of Brightwood Park, they host that Jack-o'-lantern trail on Trunk or Treat on October 26th. Details and registration are available on the website. I went by last year. It's crazy, loaded with kids, and it's supposed to again be a beautiful day, so I'm sure it'll be very popular. And then don't forget the Westfield Police Department, along with the Rec and Westfield Optimist Club, hosting the Trunk or Treat Halloween event on Sunday, this Sunday, October 22nd. They've got the Cops and Goblins festivities from 12 to 2, followed by the Halloween parade, which does require registration. So it looks like it's going to be another big weekend in Westfield. And very importantly, it's another very, very big week in a couple weeks. There's a general election on November 5th, and just as a reminder, 3 ways to vote in the upcoming election. You can vote by mail, and you can actually request your mail-in vote ballot application until Tuesday, October 29th. So you have until Tuesday if you still want to vote by mail. My ballot is already in, I'm happy to say. Early in-person voting begins this Saturday, October 26th through Sunday the 3rd. Union County College is the closest destination for us here in Westfield, but you can check all the other locations available elsewhere. And very importantly, November 5th, Election Day, polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Any information about mail ballots, early in person, or just November 5th, please go to unioncountyvotes.com. It's a very comprehensive site that gives you everything that you need to know. Most importantly, please vote. Please get your kids to vote. Please vote. So, regarding tonight's agenda, we have some very important legislative items on the agenda this evening. A few I want to highlight. Several resolutions to award for various recreation items, the replacement of the full filtration system at Memorial Pool, authorization for the town to submit a grant application for Memorial Park shade structure so they can hold outdoor classes, and lastly, authorization of a contract for the design plan of Tamacos Park. It's a very exciting development, and later when we vote on that, I'm going to actually have Councilman Kiefer, who's the liaison to the Recreation Commission, maybe talk a little bit about before the vote. Lastly, we have an important ordinance on first reading to amend the 1 Westfield Place redevelopment plan. But before we hear from Streetworks and our town professionals to present the proposed changes, I do want to provide a little bit of background and context on what is some very good news in this project moving forward. So as you will hear in tonight's presentation, the amended ordinance reduces the scope of what is allowed to be developed on the 1 Westfield Place properties by approximately 25%, which means a reduction in the project scale and traffic impact. You may recall that I've said in prior public remarks that we would continue to listen to feedback about the 1 Westfield Place project. In fact, last February, after a favorable court ruling for the town against the Westfield advocates in their litigation, I made remarks at a council meeting about the path forward for the project, offering reassurance that the elected officials in Streetworks were continuing to listen to resident concerns. I reiterated then that as details of the plans were finalized, we would be seeking opportunities to address concerns without compromising our favorable financial agreement and key project initiatives. And I reiterated that we would be advocating for any compromises that could be considered as Streetworks engaged in leasing conversations with potential office tenants. And that's precisely what happened. Streetworks ultimately determined that some changes to the redevelopment plan would be required to accommodate the needs of interested office tenants. And we seized this as an opportunity to revisit the RDP and negotiate a series of changes that address many resident concerns. All members of the town council met with Streetworks in April and provided their input. After months of negotiations by our team of professionals, most of our requested changes are now in the amended RDP. The Bipartisan Finance Policy Committee reviewed the amended redevelopment plan at their last meeting on October 10th, which was then shared with every council member last week and is now up for a vote for introduction tonight. Streetworks and our professionals will be taking us through a full presentation of the changes shortly. The main headline is that the project is being reduced by 25%, yet still delivers $157 million in revenue to the town over 30 years that can support future budget needs and/or lower taxes. It delivers significant public benefits and support the following key objectives, which we've laid out since day one. That is expanding and diversifying our tax base, restoring downtown jobs because we've lost 2,200 since 2015, and increasing daytime foot traffic, and improving pedestrian safety and traffic mitigation, and advancing our affordable housing obligations while protecting the town from high-density residential development. And it's on this last point that I really want to speak more specifically and at length. It's particularly important after we just received our 4th round of affordable housing obligation numbers from the state on Friday at 5 o'clock. These obligations, and it's every 10 years, so we're up in our 4th round in the next 10 years. These obligations require the town to specify how it will address its calculated affordable housing obligation for the next 10 years, which they have determined to be 397 affordable housing units. Since this number reflects only 20% of what must be set aside for affordable units, the total number of units that would need to be built to meet that obligation would be 2,000 residential units in Westfield, which we know is simply not possible. But it is premature to be alarmed. In the last round, for example, we were originally obligated to enable the development of 1,090 affordable units, or 7,000 total units. Ultimately, it was negotiated down to 69, which was 470 total units. After former Mayor Skibitsky's administration had productive discussions with the Fair Share Housing Center to arrive at a more reasonable settlement, which reflected our realistic development potential. All of the major projects that have been built over the past 10 years are a direct result of that settlement, which reflect the best possible outcome for the town, in spite of claims of overdevelopment by some residents. You do not want a builder's remedy lawsuit. To that end, we will be forming a committee of elected officials to work with Town Planner Don Samet, our Affordable Housing Outside Counsel, and Topology to evaluate and respond to these numbers ahead of the state's January deadline. But fortunately, we already have a head start. The 64 affordable units from the Sophia, American Legion Veterans Project, and the One Westfield Place project will all count towards our 4th round of obligations. The timing of receiving these 4th round numbers is indeed fortuitous and underscores why the One Westfield Place redevelopment plan for the Lord and Taylor properties is critical to advancing our affordable housing obligations and, importantly, protecting the town from potentially higher density residential development on those properties. Without a plan in place, these properties would be at risk and most likely subject to much higher residential density requirements as part of any future housing plan requiring state approval that would give the town immunity from builder's remedy lawsuits. This is not hyperbole. In fact, the Fair Share Housing Center had previously expressed keen interest in the 3rd round and seeing the Lord and Taylor properties developed as housing, which they brought up in the town's negotiations in our 3rd round settlement in 2017. The town argued at the time, convincingly, that those properties should not be included since Lord and Taylor was one of our largest private employers, which is clearly no longer the case. The One Westfield plan for redevelopment of these properties has put us in the driver's seat by establishing regulations which provide for affordable housing in a manner consistent with our master plan, rather than as determined by the courts if any builder's remedy lawsuit were to arise. Additionally, prior to the adoption of the One Westfield Place redevelopment plan, the south side parking lot was zoned for mixed-use commercial and residential uses, but is now, because of this redevelopment plan, zoned only for commercial use under this plan. While the Fair Share Housing Center doesn't typically require municipalities develop their own properties, God bless you, the commercial-only zoning of the south lot property provides an extra layer of insurance that no residential housing can be built there. So in terms of next steps, tonight is simply a vote to introduce the ordinance to reduce the scope of One Westfield Place. It will then be referred to the Planning Board for Master Plan Consistency Review, and as with any ordinance, there will be a public hearing at the next meeting on November 12th, which is actually in 3 weeks instead of 2 due to Election Day, followed by an adoption vote. For those that have claimed short notice or lack of transparency, tonight's introduction is exactly what the ordinance process is designed to do. Present the facts, allow a few weeks for the public to get informed, and an extra week in this case, and then hold a public hearing to enable resident input before adoption. The November 12th meeting will also have votes for the corresponding amended redevelopment agreement, pilot, and financial documents for introduction and/or adoption. On December 3rd, the Town Council will vote on the ordinance to adopt amended financial agreements. Once these documents have been adopted and approved, Streetworks will then present their site plan application to the Planning Board for approval next year. Once again, this is an amendment to the existing redevelopment plan, not a replacement plan. If this smaller amended plan does not pass the council, the existing redevelopment plan for the larger plan that was approved and adopted in 2023 remains in place. So in terms of tonight, we'll be hearing from Streetworks as well as our team of professionals whose valuable expertise has captured the input of our residents and elected officials to move the plan forward. The presentations for the purpose of process will be directed to the Town Council, and only the elected officials will be asking the presenters questions this evening, with an opportunity for the public to weigh in at the November 12th public hearing. So with that, let's move to the presentation, and we're going to start off with Streetworks, and it's a familiar face, Doug Adams, and new mom, Ann Landau. And then that's going to be followed by a presentation by our redevelopment planner, Chris Colley, with some probably weighing in by our planner, Don Samet, then our redevelopment bond counsel, Matt Jessup, and our redevelopment attorney counsel, Steve Lennox. So with that, we'll hand it over to Doug. Thank you
Mayor,
all.
may I just ask a quick question? Do you want us to save questions till the end?
Yes. All questions you save to the end, so take good notes, and because I think having everybody have the full context is helpful.
There it is. There you go. All right. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Town for the opportunity to be here tonight to present amendments that we're proposing for the One Westfield Place plan. As you mentioned, Ann Landau, the design manager for the project, will be helping me in this presentation, getting into some of the more details. I'll speak to some of the headlines. And Chris Carr, our head of design and planning overall, is here as well to assist. We're excited to bring this forward, these proposed changes after really careful consideration and continued council and community input that we've received on the plan as we move forward, including meetings held back in April with the council. We've also been underway with direct communications with key anchor tenants that are necessary for the project to move forward, as stipulated by the town and the plan itself in terms of pre-leasing requirements, not only in the market, but written into the redevelopment agreement itself. In addition, we've worked heavily with potential residential builders that have been active and are active in the New Jersey market for multiple decades to potentially work with us on the various residential housing in the project. Timing is important because as we work with these tenants and we work with these potential partners, which would be a great asset, it's important that the project continues to move forward towards a reality, and that is why we're in front of the council today. We have really tried to balance the requirements of these constituents, the town, and represented by the council, the community, which we continue to hear from, as well as those anchor tenants and other involvements in the financing markets, the residential markets, to really create a project that is financially secure for us and the town, but can be reduced in scale as we continue to hear would be the goal of all involved. I'm going to skip forward. The amendments we're proposing tonight remain consistent with the town's master plan, which was just undertaken before we started working on this plan, and the RDP principles, which will be covered by the staff after me. our goal continues. You know, Lord and Taylor started here in 1939, this was built. It was an original anchor for the downtown. And we wanted to continue to be an anchor for downtown. And I'm going to read one of our mission statements that came when we first started thinking about this project, we think is incredibly important still today. We want to be an anchor downtown that serves as a national model for a Main Street community, one that prioritizes people over cars, is dedicated to sustainability, walkability, inclusivity, and affordability, and one that meets the needs and desires of all residents and downtown businesses, including those who have been here for generations, as well as those that have just arrived. Just to go back and remind, there are 3 primary zones in the One Westfield plan: the West Zone on the original Lord and Taylor property, the North Zone, which is almost completely proposed public improvements except for a residential building to use to screen the proposed public garage, and the South Zone, which is primarily corporate headquarters office and the public improvements. At the highest level, the plan looks similar that it did before, but myself and Ann will go through the specifics in each zone over the next 10 minutes. Some of the headlines. The program overall is reduced by 181,000 gross square feet, or 25%. Those reductions are split pretty evenly between the West Zone and the South Zone. One of the major moves there is to eliminate an office building in the South Zone of 90,000 square feet. That has also creates a direct reduction in traffic of between 36 and 40% during the peak hours, which is a big benefit to the changes in these plans. It also lowers several building heights by 15 to 30 feet in both the West and the South zones, and that was one of the things that we've heard along the way from the beginning, as well as continued through this process. The South public parking garage can begin during the West Zone execution, and we are requesting to lift the age restriction on 16 of the West Zone townhomes to expand the market rate offerings. We will continue to honor all of the affordable housing that was proposed in the original application. There are shifts to move underground parking to above ground, but they are in all cases shielded by residential and retail uses and not fronting on the streets themselves. Excuse me. There's a lot of key program elements that remain in the project. The public improvements, the North Town Square is remade, and we'll go through that in a moment. The South Town Green, as anticipated before, becomes a true place to gather on the south side of the railroad station. The North and South public garages accommodate commuter parking, which is replaced at a 1-to-1 ratio, which is always one of the unmovable goals of the town. And 10 traffic intersections through the town are improved to create a better flow of traffic post-development than pre-development. There will be the adaptive reuse of the majority of the Lord and Taylor building on the West Zone into an office building surrounded by residential. And the residential counts remain the same as they were before, despite the reduced size of the overall project. 205 residential units, apartment, townhouses, and lofts on the North Zone. That is 174 market rate units and 33 affordable units, or 15% as is required. 138 units, 67% are age restricted, 55 and over, as was originally approved. On the south side, instead of 2 office buildings, is a single office building of 120,000 gross square feet. That's a mass timber office building on the South Zone there at the headquarters that we see as one of the very first mass timber buildings built in New Jersey, and we think represents the future of where office and sustainable building lies. That area is also fronted by retail to make sure the South Avenue retail corridor remains active. The stormwater retainage and infrastructure is dramatically improved since we are tearing nothing down, but really replacing and adding on top of what's our existing surface parking. We are also continued to commit to do evening and weekend parking in the office building on the south zone for use by the community and the retailers. I'm going to go into the west zone specifically. Again, overall, a smaller program that meets the need of the anchor tenant that is necessary to fill and maintain the Lord & Taylor building, although we maintain the same unit count and affordability.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the physical manifestation of these changes on the west zone. So the gross square footage of the residential is decreasing by about 37,000 square feet. Our unit count remains the same, including the flats on the Lord & Taylor site and the townhouses across the street on the Clark and Ferris site, as well as the North Avenue site. Our heights are being reduced on the Lord & Taylor site. On the west side, we're going from 6 stories down to 4. On the east side, we're going from 6 stories down to 5. And our townhome unit count remains the same. We are switching 16 units that were previously age-restricted to non-age restricted. On the office, which is in the center of the Lord & Taylor site, our gross area is coming down by a little over 55,000 square feet, and a reduction in the height of that building of almost 30 feet. So we'll look at that in the elevation in a moment. The office building itself will continue to have retail along the street frontage to activate the street. Let's get into the next one. So this is a table that describes some of the changes just mentioned. So again, the height reductions on the west and east residential, 2 stories on the west, 20 feet there, 10 feet on the east, 1 story coming off there, and then the 2 stories, again, almost 30 feet on the commercial building. So that 36 feet that's remaining on the office building is what exists today. It's not going to have anything added on top in the currently proposed concept plan. And then you can see the overall gross square footage reduction on the site. Some of the residential square footage has shifted around a little bit, which we'll look at in the plan next. So that's why the east residential building has gone up a bit, but the west residential has significantly decreased. So it's an overall decrease. Okay. And then looking at how the plan is organized, you see what was previously approved in the middle and what we're proposing on the bottom. We still have the office adaptive reuse in the center. Of course, that's the existing Lord & Taylor building. And then on either side, there's a residential building. You can see on the amended plan, we now have a parking deck on the southwest corner of the site. And that's really to serve the tenant. It was a tenant need that we realized when we started working through these plans. The parking was previously provided in the podiums of the residential buildings. We really needed to separate out the tenants' parking and have it not be shared with the residential parking. So we had to find a place on the site for that. We moved it as far away from North Avenue as possible. That's why it's located in the south edge of the site. And then it's lined with the west residential, which you see to the north of that. So the residential building is taller than the parking deck behind it, and that will screen it from view from the North Avenue side. Again, in the center, we have the office and retail building. So you see the retail facing towards North Avenue, activating the plaza space that's provided there. And then to the right of the page is the east residential building, which is a little bit reconfigured, again, getting the parking out of a podium, and instead the residential building is now wrapping a parking structure that is connected to it and services that building. And then in elevation, you can see what was previously approved and what is proposed today, and the height reductions are reflected here. So on the right of the page is the west residential building. You can see that 2 floors have been taken off here. So as the site topography goes up from east to west, that building actually reads as a 3-story building when you get to the western edge of the site, and you can see that you don't see any of the parking garage behind it. It's shorter than that building. And then in the center, the portion of the Lord & Taylor that will remain is the sort of western chunk of the building. We're proposing to remove 4 bays from the east side of the building. And this 36-foot height is, again, how it stands today. No addition on top. And then again, on the east residential building, 1 story has been removed, and it's coming down 10 feet. Okay. Do you want to go to the north side?
Sure. I think to summarize from a non-planner speak, the big shift here is to separate the parking that's necessary for the anchor tenant, but then completely hide it behind the building in front of it. And also, as you move west, that's the single-family residential neighborhood to the west of our site, and really we move the massing in the reverse order. So the larger building shifted away from the residential neighborhood and still got 10 feet shorter, and the other building closer to the residential neighborhood on the west got shorter and much smaller. So really trying to not only reduce the massing, but shift it appropriately and keep it in a place where it's hiding any parking structures, which is the original principles of the RDP, is to not have those parking structures directly visible to the city, to the street. The north zone, frankly, is the simplest. We're not proposing any changes to the north zone. 29 market rate and 6 affordable flat units there at the train station. Those have always anticipated to be smaller units that would create a place of housing close to mass transit, requiring a lot less parking, a lot less traffic, and would just essentially use the public garage there. So it ends up continuing as it was originally intended to shield the public garage from the main street there. And it's the lowest generator of traffic for that location in residential. Moving on to the south zone, right? Again, this is one of the larger changes. We had 2 office buildings there, as well as a full several levels of parking below grade that service those office buildings. Those office buildings were a great activator, replacing jobs and foot traffic downtown, but they did generate a fair amount of traffic. And those traffic improvements then that were approved and that were proposed and approved were to accommodate that. We are cutting the office from 210,000 square feet to 120,000 square feet, but maintaining the same traffic improvements, even with a 36 to 40% reduction in overall trip generation during the morning and evening rush hour. We do think that the continued presence of office there is critical to the overall plan. We've gotten tremendous feedback from the market on Westfield and this location, this town, and we remain committed and very optimistic about this space and meeting the pre-leasing requirements that the town set for us on that. So with that, we can go over some more specifics.
Okay, on the south zone, as Doug mentioned, we have 1 office building now. So the western office building will remain. It'll be reshaped a little bit. and it'll remain at 5 stories and 65 feet of height as previously approved. On the east building, no longer an office, it's a mixed-use garage, so garage that will service the office as well as the retail. It will be considerably shorter than the office that was previously proposed. Currently, we anticipate a 3-story garage at about 36 feet. The maximum would be up to 48 feet should the office require additional parking. As Doug mentioned, the square footage is being reduced significantly, so from 210,000 square feet of office down to 120 proposed. And then we'll keep the street retail as originally proposed, basically lining South Avenue as well as the public space west of the office building. Again, the plans to compare here, previously approved, you can see it was 2 buildings, both with office and then lined with retail. And then the amended proposed plan below, keeping a lot of our priorities intact with regards to creating an activated street, but also wanting to reduce the bulk and the height on the site. So you can see in plan, the retail stretches all the way along the front of the building, facing South Avenue. And then in elevation, the height has significantly decreased, almost by half in the proposed plan.
Also of noting, the distance between the 2 buildings, which was coined as the Boulevard, a privately owned but publicly accessible space for gathering, but more importantly, for a view corridor and access through to the railroad, right? If you didn't want to go all the way around, if you're coming up the street. That remains and actually gets wider in the proposed plan between the building and the garage. To provide more of a view corridor, more access, more publicly accessible space between the building, the 2 retail and the buildings behind. The public improvements, as I mentioned before, the South Garage, Town Green, Town Square, and the traffic mitigations related to the initial phase of improvements would all be completed, could be completed, followed by a North Garage, additional mitigations for the traffic in the second zone. This is the overall plan. We are still committed as part of the public improvements to alternative ways of getting to the train station. So obviously the garages can handle automobiles. There's also flexible space built into them to handle bike, ride share, other ways that people are finding to come to and fro these days. And here you can see the outline of the bike trails that run to the main infrastructure, as well as the project and the town pursuing a grant for pedestrian infrastructure over the area to the west as well, bridging over the road, if that comes to be. But we still believe that connectivity to the transit-oriented development is incredibly important. You can see here the beginnings of the evolutions. We've worked with the town and the staff. These are really driven by the town because it's the town's public improvement. We move into a role of facilitator and consultant and expert at times, but this is the South Green to create a real lawn, a place that's convenient to drop off and pick up, that has adequate queuing so that everybody can get in and out without traffic snarls. And it works with our building as well. So this is an early evolution of what will continue through this process. On the north side, you'll see this one moved forward first in working with the town. It's critical, the current intersection in front of the town square has 2 entrances and egresses spaced apart and a road on the other side. I was actually driving by there again today on my way here, making it really difficult for pedestrians to negotiate safely. This plan come up together because, again, this is public space, publicly owned land, improves the ingress and egress, organizes the intersection, creates a much safer environment, as well as, we think, an incredible place to gather and as a showplace for the entrance and gateway to the community, anchored now by the great new restaurant that we saw on the restored train station, which I think they did a magnificent job, in my opinion. These are the intersections that are included and approved to be upgraded as part of this project. That continues, even with reduced scope. All of the original intersection improvements would still be undertaken and put into place. I think with that, we'll turn it over, but thank you for your time, and I look forward to questions later.
Thank you, Doug. So now we'll hear from our redevelopment planner, Chris Colley from Topology.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Set my timer. My name is Chris Colley. I'm a principal with Topology. First thing I want to say to you is that I am here sort of with a somewhat different perspective than the Streetworks folks. I'm here really as the town's representative. So it's my job as the primary author of this redevelopment plan and primary author of the amendment to sort of evaluate the proposed amendments, the amended concept, against the overall principles that we set forth in the original plan and the principles that led to that document. We've been serving in this capacity since March 2020, and thanks for having me back again this evening. Just when you look at my document, the plan that you're considering tonight, you don't see building elevations so much, you don't see blueprints like you might see in the Streetworks presentations, and that's intentional because we should all sort of level set that the redevelopment plan is really, it's a box, it's a set of regulations, it's a set of parameters. The numbers in there are going to be round. They might talk about 262 or 263,000 square feet of residential development. In a redevelopment plan, we're setting a set of parameters, not a sort of precise set of calculations like you might see in those drawings. But critically, it sort of sets a detailed box that can lay out public improvements and mandate public improvements and make sure that the municipality gets what it's trying to get out of a project. Touched a little bit on history before, but because this is an amendment, I think it's important just to sort of remember where we've come from on this. This is an abbreviation of a slide I used previously a couple years ago. All of this kind of started from a planning perspective back in 2019 with your master plan reexamination. You'll recall shortly after that, properties were designated in need of redevelopment. In June of 2021, you adopted your master plan, which remains sort of the guiding light of this amendment. And then in February of 2023, we adopted the original redevelopment plan for this site. And as I was sort of working through some of these changes and going back and forth and evaluating the amended drawings that Streetworks was bringing forward and thinking about what they might mean for the actual content of a redevelopment plan, I went back to some of the slides we presented in January and February of 2023, just to kind of remind myself, like, why'd the town get into all of this in the first place, right? So this is just a slide that we did 18 months ago, and this is what we said at the time. The key plan outcomes, when I stood here before, and the things that were really important were the public spaces, housing opportunities, economic activity, improved sidewalks, safer intersections, modern parking, green building, design control, and all of that with impacts that are mitigated. So for me, like, looking at these 8 or 9 things here and evaluating, are we still meeting those provisions, was critical as I worked on this amendment to this plan. And I think, like, sort of from a public policy perspective, given that it's an amendment, should be a bit of a guiding light. I will say as a spoiler, I have this slide at the end, and I think the amended plan still touches on all of these things in a satisfactory way. So Streetworks sort of showed drawings about the changes to their concept. It's really my job for the bulk of my slides here to make sure the council understands the details in the document and how things have changed. So I'm not hitting every change, but I did highlight the ones that I think are most important. We'll start in the west zone, and specifically Lord and Taylor. So some key changes to the document in the Lord and Taylor plan. A couple of them are related to use. The original plan did not include urgent care as a permitted use. Given the sort of efforts by Streetworks to work to secure a medical office tenant, we thought it was important to include as an additional permitted use in that zone, urgent care, which we've defined and limited in terms of square footage and in terms of parking. You also heard from Ann that there's a new parking structure that's proposed to support the office tenant in there. That's now explicitly written into the redevelopment plan, both from a use perspective, but also, again, sort of drawing a box, limiting it in terms of where it can be located, that it needs to be set back from the street, that it needs to be behind a residential building, and that it's subject to certain design standards. From a density perspective, you heard a little bit about the reductions there. The maximum residential floor area permitted in that zone has been reduced by 10% from 300 to 270,000 square feet. Similarly with the Lord and Taylor, the maximum floor area of that building has been reduced from 150 down to 115. The heights are reduced in terms of the maximum permitted across the three buildings, from 6 to 4 in the west, from 4 to 3 in the central, and from 6 to 5 in the east. With those changes, there are some changes to the bulk frameworks, meaning where the buildings can be really. One of the advantages of the change on the west side is that we were able to push that building, the westernmost residential building, a little further away from the residential property there. The buildings have shifted a little bit back towards the train line, which we've always considered to be the least sensitive of the frontages, given the neighbor being the train. And there is a reduction in terms of the minimum amount of pervious coverage that's required in each of these zones. So I will hit on that for a second. This is one that I sort of grappled with for a while, this request, and I thought a lot about the initial goal of the project to reduce stormwater, right? And if we're reducing the minimum pervious surfaces, can we still meet that goal? And the outcome of sort of the back and forth here is that yes, we're still keeping the standard in the plan to reduce the amount of stormwater reduction by the 30%. And also importantly, all of the landscaping standards that were in the plan remain. So from that perspective, I felt like that reduction in the minimum pervious coverage was appropriate. Couple changes on the townhouse slides, or townhouse sites. These are the ones across the street here. There's been a little bit of rejiggering of the units. So previously there were 16 townhouses permitted on each of those sites. 2 of those townhouses, have now shifted to the what we call the North Avenue North, which is the site right across from Lord and Taylor. So still 32 units, just 18 on one site, 14 on the other. Sort of a similar change to the coverage ratio that I mentioned earlier. And there is a modification to the step back permitted from the Bank of America, as well as the old Coldwell Banker, and that's to accommodate bringing 2 of the townhouses potentially onto this frontage here. Those are structures that are already built relatively close to the line. I think could create a nice street frontage on Clark. That's the west zone changes. South zone, been touched on. We added mixed-use parking structure as a permitted use. I do want to spend a second on this. We were very careful to not just sort of blanket permit any parking structure along the South Avenue frontage. What the plan says is that you can have what we're calling a mixed-use parking structure. That's defined as a parking structure with an active street frontage at the ground floor of retail or restaurant along South Avenue. It also comes with certain design standards about screening and about the uses extending the entirety of South Avenue. So that was really important for us in this amendment to make sure that the amendment didn't simply say parking structure as a permitted use, but that there were sort of parameters for that structure. As was mentioned, the reduction in the office GFA, this is one of those ones where we're building a box, so the minimum that we've reduced it to is 140. We have slightly increased the retail or restaurant, And the rationale for this is we do have that frontage now of the parking structure. We want to make sure there's enough retail or restaurant permitted to extend the length of that. The height change was already referenced, but I will say the parking structure is shorter than the previous office building that would have been allowed there, 4 stories, 48 feet. We've increased the minimum distance between structures, and this is to really build in a regulation requiring the expanded boulevard extension. Slight change to the front yard setback for the really the mixed-use parking structure. We felt okay with that because it's a smaller building and a shorter building, and then the similar coverage ratio. So, you know, when you look at the document, you look at the red lines, you might see a lot of red, and for me, again, it was like, are we still meeting the core objectives of the plan, of the goals, and these key outcomes that we identified? I think we are, and I think that's why the amendment sort of meets the mark in terms of the overall project priorities. Mayor already touched on this a little bit, but just so we understand what we're doing and what potentially comes next. Council's considering an introduction this evening, would go to the planning board for consistency review, would come back here for potential adoption. Should that happen, there would then be subsequent documents about the RDA, et cetera. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to one of the attorneys who can talk about those things. Thank you.
And I know he hates it when I say it, but Ward 4 resident Matt Jessup.
What am I doing here, Jim? 5. Where's that? What's up? Slideshow? From the beginning? Oh, that was easy. So good evening, Mayor, council members. As I think the Mayor just mentioned, my name is Matt Jessup from McManaman, Scotland and Bauman, and we are your redevelopment bond counsel. Let me maybe lead with a little bit of good news. Of everyone that you're hearing from tonight, I have the fewest number of slides. So let's jump right in. What's that? You're not allowed to speak. Okay, so you've heard a lot about the planning changes that are outlined and detailed in the proposed redevelopment plan amendment. Although not being considered tonight legislatively, obviously there are associated economic changes to the redevelopment project when you account for the type of changes that you just heard from. So it's important, I think, for you, the governing body, for the public, for everyone to get sort of a refresher on where we were and where we are based on these new, these plan amendments. So some things, important things that haven't changed, and you've heard some of these already. As you may recall, the redeveloper is making a pilot payment, a payment in lieu of taxes on all of the redevelopment that you just heard about. That is not changing. And the amount of the pilot from a computation perspective is not changing, right? The redeveloper is paying 13% of annual gross revenue, which, as a reminder, is all revenue from the project. So rents, parking fees if they charge them, storage fees, pet fees, you name it. If they're charging rent for it or charging for it, it is gross revenue. We do not account for operating expenses. This is not a net number. All we care about is what they gross. 13% of annual gross revenue in years 1 through 5, 14% of annual gross revenue in years 6 through 15, and 15% of annual gross revenue in years 16 to 30. So there's no change there to the proposed pilot. Likewise, no change to the concept that we are funding public improvements throughout the downtown. You heard that earlier. It's sort of a core portion of what this project is producing. The Town Square North and the Town Green South, the north and south parking decks, all the traffic mitigation at the 10+ intersections you heard about, environmental remediation, parking technology are all still included. We also do have the option to fund certain other public improvements that we had as optional improvements in the past. You may recall the underground walkway to get from the south to north side, vice versa, the pedestrian walkway to get from the north parking deck to the train station. And at the time, we had Quimby in there as well. I understand Quimby may end up being accelerated, so that may not ultimately be a part of the public improvements. The key public improvement that has sort of moved from one that we're doing to one that becomes optional is some of the hardscape, streetscape, and road improvements, and we'll talk about that when we get to the budget. Financial protections. We spent a lot of time last year talking about all the ways the town was protected in light of the fact that it's issuing general obligation redevelopment area bonds. Those all largely remain in place. There is a new added security feature that I do want to spend a minute on because it's important. Under the current deal as it stands today, the redeveloper is obligated to make their pilot payments in accordance with the amounts that I just read off to you. But there's technically no guarantee that those amounts, as properly charged, would equal debt service on our bonds. And of course, we are using the pilot revenue to pay debt service on our bonds. That's a critical tenet, right? How does that happen? If the projects are, 20% occupied for years and years and years, then it's potentially a concern. But in that circumstance, the developer wouldn't be in default. They'd be paying their pilot as they're supposed to, but we would not be getting enough revenue to pay debt service on our bonds. So this new iteration proposes a minimum pilot payment equal to debt service on our bonds under any circumstance. So effectively, through the pilot payment, the developer is guaranteeing the debt service on the town bonds so that there is no possibility of a shortfall day one or year 25 when the bonds are ultimately being paid off. The special assessment, which was critical to provide and protect the town for construction risk, does not change, right? As a reminder, the idea there was we're going to be issuing bonds at and around the time that construction starts, and we need revenue from those projects once they're construction complete. But what happens if we issue our bonds and then for some reason construction stops? The revenue never comes, we don't have revenue to pay debt service. The way we protected against that was the special assessment. That is still in place with two sort of minor modifications. One, the 5 West Zone projects originally were all agreeing to pay their special assessment and to cover each other if anybody doesn't pay. So if they each had to pay $100,000 and URE 5 didn't pay, the other 4 collectively had to come up with the fifth's $100,000. Because now we're going to have a different office tenant than we are the 4 residential tenants, they have really nothing to do with each other from a business arrangement, right? They don't know each other. They don't want to get involved in each other's finances. So the 4 residential UREs, entities, will continue to guarantee each other's, and the 5th medical will be on its own. So the 5th medical will have to pay its share. The 4 others will have to pay their share. Of course, if the 5th doesn't pay, we always have the lien against the property, just like any other property in town that fails to pay its taxes. That lien goes to tax sale, you generate the revenue, and we use it to pay debt service. Similarly, the north-south, what were 3 UREs also were what we call cross-collateralized. If one failed to pay, the others had to pick it up. Now the north and the south will sort of stand alone. We are reducing from 3 bond issues down to 2. This saves on cost efficiencies, saves on cost of issuance. It allows us, I think, to better line up when we issue bonds compared to when revenue starts to come in. We are increasing the obligation that the South Zone office building be at least 75% credit tenant leased before we move forward on our side. You may remember we have an agreement now, the Public Improvement Financing Agreement, that has a couple pages of criteria before we issue our bonds. We are thankfully doing our best to simplify that and, quite frankly, provide more flexibility for the town to manage interest rate risk and benefit to potentially lower debt service, which provides more pilot revenue back to the town budget. And finally, there's a West Zone residential development partner that Doug talked about earlier, and they provide that equity infusion and financing certainty to make sure that the project is going to move forward. This is a sort of key slide from a financial perspective, right? These are, at least from my perspective, all the key variables that we spent a lot of time on in February of 2023, showing you sort of side by side where our critical changes are. So total public improvements go from 54.3 million to 41.9 million. Again, that's really a product of when the overall scope of a project comes down, the overall amount of revenue available comes down. So it's reasonable to think that, you know, some of the public improvements are going to be, you know, not be as high a priority from a funding perspective. So about $12.5 million of public improvements or public improvement funding that gets removed. The north and south zone property purchase price remains at $11.1 million. I think this is notable for a couple reasons. One, the town is sort of relying on that money for two reasons. 50% of it gets used to pay for public improvements. The other 50% goes to your budget. The other reason this is really notable is recall the appraisal that really valued that land based on per square foot office. And as you've heard, we're going from 210,000 square feet of office down to 120,000 square feet of office. So, you know, you follow that same appraisal methodology, the value of that property is cut dramatically. And yet we are holding that purchase price at the same $11.1 million. Again, redeveloper contribution, the developer in the current plan is paying $8 million of effectively an equity contribution into the public improvement program. With the resizing of the project and all of the reduction of the project, the revenues are different, the expenses are different, obviously, so it's not a surprise that we see a reduction in the redeveloper contribution down to $4.7 million, which is still being used to fund, 100% of which is being used to fund the public improvements. Our total expected borrowing secured by or repaid by the pilots is going down by $9.5 million. 43.7 million over 3 bond issues, down to a little over 34 million, and 2 bond issues. As a result, we'll propose to reduce the maximum bonds and notes that are currently authorized, which is 57 million, down to 45 million, which again is basically a pro rata reduction. We would do that through an amendment to the redevelopment area bond ordinance that's already in place and the redevelopment area bond resolution that's already in place. Again, sort of future legislation that follows the redevelopment plan. Interest rate on bonds remains the same. I told you in February of 2023 that's a conservative rate. I tell you in October of 2024, that still is a conservative rate. I would argue 3.25% or so is a more reasonable rate for 25 years for a AAA credit like the town. And not that we can guarantee that, but just order of magnitude, 3.25% on these bonds is another $4.2 million reduction in debt service, which is really $4.2 million of additional revenue into the town municipal budget over that 25-year period. So interest rates, you know, matter, right, relative to what's available here. Annual debt service is reduced, obviously. Total 30-year town revenue is reduced. I'll say obviously when you see all the changes, including you lose an office building, right? I mean, that's $39 million of project revenue that was going to the town that, you know, you don't have as a result of the smaller scope. So we go from 214 million to 156 million. Our debt service is down by 15.8 million. And so at the end of the day, we originally expected over 32 years to have about $143 million of available revenue to the town for budget purposes, and that is now at about $103.8 million. Again, assuming all the same apples-to-apples interest rate comparisons, debt service comparisons we had before. This shows you what we're funding in bond issue number 1. We sort of reprioritized, and I think Doug hit on this a little bit, reprioritized how when we're going to fund which public improvements. The key one here in the first bond issue is the south deck, right? The south public parking deck goes up first, together with the north zone traffic, the south zone traffic, the west zone traffic, the north town square, and the south town green. All of those funding priorities are moved up to the first bond issue. Recall that currently the first bond issue goes to fund the north parking deck. These improvements, I would argue, are more beneficial to the town, they're more beneficial to the residents, and at the end of the day, the north deck is necessary when there's a south tenant, but it's not really necessary before that. So to be able to put all of these improvements up front, fund them through a bond issue together with that $4.7 million redeveloper contribution, we think sort of makes a lot more sense from a financial planning perspective and providing more public improvements to the public faster. And then again, we only have 2 bond issues. So the second bond issue, what's left over, the north garage and the south zone traffic, which are the south zone traffic mitigation improvements that are necessary to accommodate the office, which is why those are sort of at the end. Because again, until we're building an office building, the north garage isn't critically necessary, nor is the south zone traffic. So again, a combination of bond issue and 50% of the land sale purchase price on the north and south zones fund those improvements. And that is all I have. So, Steve, are you?
Yeah, Steve, do you want to talk about process or documents and so forth, so everybody kind of knows what to expect? Thank you.
I am happy to report I have 0 slides. Steve Malenik from Green Bamrow Smith & Davis. Good to see all of you again. I serve as Westfield's Redevelopment Council. Process, and the mayor touched on it a little bit earlier today. What you're doing today and what's on the agenda is an introduction of an ordinance to amend an existing redevelopment plan. It is just that, an introduction that will kickstart a process by which the planning board hears it for consistency and reports back to this council with that consistency report along with any other recommendations it may have. There will be a public hearing in this room, which will be 21 days from now, so the public now has that time to absorb and prepare for that public hearing. If this were to be adopted, that would allow the council to also consider several other pieces of legislation. You heard from Matt just now about a lot of the financial impacts and changes to the bonds. So there would be ordinances amending the bonds. There will be an ordinance to introduce amending the financial agreements and special assessment agreements. And then there'll be obviously resolutions which would amend the agreements that we have negotiated with Streetworks and a redevelopment agreement, a public improvement financing agreement, and potentially the construction agreement as well. If this plan were not adopted, as the mayor said, then we are right where we are now. Nothing is changing because this is an amendment. The existing redevelopment plan as it's written right now stays in place. The agreements stay in place. The development program that has been negotiated would continue. So I'm here to answer any other questions about process, but I just, from a global perspective, since I'm the last one speaking, I'll just say how this came about. Streetworks, as redevelopers of this projects of this scale often happens when speaking with potential tenants, especially anchor tenants like we're talking about here, as well as capital partners and residential partners that they're speaking with. We learn things and things have to be adjusted, and they came to us. At the same time, we were hearing from you, we were hearing from the public, and it became an opportunity for our team. You heard from Chris, Matt, me, Liz, and everybody else of your professionals had the opportunity to take this opportunity to make this a better plan before recommending it and presenting it to you. And we believe that is now the state it's in, that we have a smaller project, yet a financially more secure project that is going to achieve all the goals that you as a council set out to do when this was adopted last year. So happy to answer any of the questions you have, but I think that concludes our presentations. Thanks.
So now I will refer to the council for questions. Sure, yeah, just raise your hand and say yes.
And to
Councilman
you?
Kiefer, yeah, let me know, exactly.
Okay. First of all, thank you for everyone. I know it's tough doing this after a long day with other stuff. I had a question for Doug, if you don't mind. You don't need to get up if you don't want to. But okay. Doug, first of all, thank you again for coming. When I came to visit you guys in your at your facility here in town in April,
Right.
I asked either you or someone else from your team, and I don't know precisely if it was you, but I'm pretty sure I may have asked. I think I did ask you. I asked if, considering changes in market conditions since the project was first conceived, whether you still intended to go forward with the commercial office space as intended, and you or whoever answered yes, you did. Now, obviously, something changed from then to now. And so my question is, when did Streetworks first notify the town that it wanted to seek an amendment of the redevelopment plan? And was that done in writing or was it done in some other fashion?
Not specifically in writing. So, like I said, first to address it, we are still committed and believe in the office. We had originally 3 office buildings, right? All of which, the 2 on the south side carried individual pre-leasing requirements for both. The revised plan has the 2 office buildings, the existing Lord & Taylor adaptively used, and the one in the south. So we're still committed to office. We still think it's an important part of the plan. We started discussions with the town, coming off of the meeting we had there, where it was directly expressed to me, traffic. We're still concerned about height. We're still concerned about the amount of office and, those other, those types of issues. So we went back, thought about it, but based on what we had learned and what we were hearing from the market and what we heard at those meetings and from your professionals, and came back after that meeting to begin discussing sort of what can we do to hear some thoughts, and we worked through it with the planning professionals over the summer and into the fall.
Oh, that started in the summer?
Yeah. I'd have to go back and look at the exact date. I don't remember.
Okay. But, so there wasn't a formal letter or written correspondence on that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I got one for you.
Yeah.
Well, if that's
I'll stay here till I don't need to be here.
Thank you. Should we have kept the original size project, how long would it take to go ahead and find the tenants that you need to go ahead and fill that space?
It wouldn't take any longer to find the tenants, but what the tenants are coming back in today's world saying they want, which is, evolves over time. This project started for me 5 years ago, our original conception of it. The tenants come back with requirements and things they need, they feel, to address what they have to do for their employees and their businesses today. So there's no additional time, but they're coming back with things. We need this, so we need your plan to accommodate this.
Thank you.
So I met with you that day, and I was one of the ones that was raising the concerns about traffic and parking. And one of the comments that was made towards the end was this project has nothing to do with parking. It's not going to help parking, which was very distressing, because I would say in the town, people want better parking and less traffic. We also discussed, I brought up the comment that this project is going to bring a lot of traffic into the town. Whether you put the light here or light there, you have the same amount of roads with a lot more cars. How is that going to help the traffic situation? And now I know you said that it's 40% less of a lot, so it's still a lot, because presently it's not good. Was there a traffic study done? Councilwoman Hapgood mentioned the other night that Mr. Federico was doing a traffic study, and we were supposed to get the results. We did not receive any results. So I'd like to know, is there a present traffic study evaluating the situation and all the other buildings that are going on in town? That's one question. So I'll let you go with that.
Yeah, I remember, and I remember many of your questions. It was directed at the project overall, but specifically on the South Zone as well. There's no full updated traffic report. What we did was we had 210,000 square feet of office. We got together with our traffic consultant, said if we were going to reduce some, because we were also getting feedback from the state of New Jersey and DOT on how they calculate traffic and how they do it, which is a different methodology, frankly, than perhaps some jurisdictions do it, et cetera. So looking at that, and said if we take the 210,000 square feet of office and bring it down to 120,000, is it a pro rata reduction? Similarly, because you have that many less people coming. And they said, for the most part, yeah, which is why we have a range so far of 36 to 40%. It's, I believe, a 40% or 41% reduction in overall office size. So it's that range we have. But we haven't, until we get through and come back for site plan approval. We still have that process to go through after with the town. It's really discussions with the traffic consultant.
And just to follow up, since we did have that meeting, there was no effort to make any contact with us afterwards. If you were so concerned about our worries about this project, I did not receive an email, I did not receive a phone call, nothing from Streetworks, nothing to indicate that you were changing the project based on what we had indicated. I find that a little disingenuous to say that that meeting was what changed the project, because no one ever had any contact with us afterwards.
Actually, if you'll let me weigh in on that, please, because it actually wouldn't be appropriate for Streetworks to be doing that. And, you know, the purpose of this legislative body is to actually set policy. We don't sit in the table and negotiate. We have professionals that do that. And it's just the same reason we don't sit in the room with Jim when he's negotiating a union contract. It's the same thing. We have professionals that do this. They're the ones that are engaging with Streetworks. It wouldn't be appropriate for them to reach out and say, did you do this? We have a team of professionals that are advocating on the town's behalf. And it's exactly what they've done, just like any other thing we do in terms of process. And that's what, so don't put that on Streetworks, because it would be inappropriate. That is a process that we have in town.
Well, I'll put it on Streetworks because you've mentioned that that meeting stimulated the change. So if that meeting stimulated the change, then we were affecting change with that meeting.
And our professionals took that input, and it's reflected in what you see.
We're representing the people of our town. We were elected.
To set policy.
And to
Correct.
make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Correct.
Right.
To
so-
set policy.
Okay, well, and we're setting a
Why we're
policy.
here tonight.
Right. So, but I would like to know, you know, if that's the case, then we're kept in the dark.
May I ask a question?
I would just say I do have a question for Doug, but I don't think it would be appropriate for Streetworks to be coming to each of us to say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? That's what this group is designed to do, is to take the policy inputs we give them and the feedback they hear from us and residents and react to it and come back with a revised plan. That's exactly how it's supposed to work. It would be completely inappropriate for them to be reaching out to us on an individual basis. When we're not experts, that's why we hire experts, to actually get to a better outcome. And I do want to applaud Matt. Guys, this backstop that he talked about is huge. There is literally no risk to this town to make these public improvements. 100% of the debt service is covered by Streetworks if there are reductions in pilot payments. I just wanted to say thank you, because I know that's something that we talked about, and I'm glad to see it reflected. But Doug, my question for you is, you talked a lot about tenant input. Can you bring to life for us what you're hearing from tenants about Westfield, about this project, both the Lord and Taylor site, the south side? You referenced a lot of positive input and desire and interest in Westfield. I think it would be really helpful for residents to hear, what are you hearing?
Sure.
What makes them so excited about Westfield?
Yeah, and this is, I'll say it in general. First, we get input from a lot of sources, tenants, municipalities. I do this across North America. I would tell you that meeting was extremely helpful, because we heard very concise, very clear direction on what people were thinking. And I'm well represented by my experts. You are as you're well. We took that away, and I think did a lot of hard work over the summer, some of it contentious, but we think it resulted in a good amendment in the end. What we're hearing is some specific things, and I'll speak first and most to the office component of the building. The market is shifting in some ways. New Jersey is still a desirable place for offices. There's a lot of density here. I think some 55% of leases in place today were signed pre-COVID. So that's like, there are a lot of businesses out there wearing clothes, and they've lost a lot of weight. And what's going through now is a sort of retailoring process, where they're going into new space that's different, it's smaller, it's in a different location, and we're seeing two main drivers: a desire for downtown, right, clear, and a desire for smaller space that makes their employees want to come to work, hence the downtowns. What is also driving is there's a lot of office buildings today that, because they're functionally obsolete, or the developer has problems with the building or other buildings in their portfolio, not developers but owners, because these buildings exist, and tenants are looking to get out of those buildings. So we see a great opportunity here for us and for the town, for someone looking for a downtown place where they can move their office and get their employees back, because that's the move. I think it's now 3.1 or 3.2 days back in the office, and we think it's headed to 4.
Next question. Thank you again for being here. I know it's not
No problem.
a long presentation, so I appreciate it. I saw in the agreement, I think this question's for you, but that an urgent care was added as one of the uses on the Lord and Taylor lot.
Right.
I'm curious, since we've got, you've had the chance to talk to residents and the council, what was the residents' feedback and the council's feedback of people you talked to about having an urgent care in downtown Westfield?
I don't know if I recall any specific to urgent care, but the idea of a medical presence there did come up. And by that, I mean a medical presence of scale, right? That building is currently 140,000 square feet. We were looking initially to reduce it to 100,000, and the current modification is even smaller. So we got positive that having the right medical there would be a benefit to the town and obviously to us. Part of what we're hearing from the tenants is that a piece of what they need to do to provide that may include the urgent care. Now, we're not talking about full-blown surgery centers, but an urgent care that would be part of a facility in there or its own little standalone. And in anticipation of that, we didn't want to, we heard it, we understand it from the tenants, so we think it's important to include now.
And on that note, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but the urgent care cannot face the street, right? It faces the parking garage.
Correct,
Right.
not directly on the front. So it's intended to be in the medical space and not the retail that's shown there.
Another question. Good. You can go first.
Thank you. Doug, thank you for, it looks like a very responsive request to us, to things that we've been hearing from the public for quite some time. I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about the above-ground parking. Obviously, at least in my view, one of the big appeals was having some parking underground in the original plan. Your presentation talked about the fact that it would be shielded parking garages. Can you elaborate on that? Because I would prefer that you use the word camouflaged.
Camouflaged or hidden.
Yes.
Yeah, so the need for the above-ground garages stem from a number of things. One of them is cost, but it's not the main driving factor. It's customer experience and employee experience where they have light and air and they're not going in. In addition, the financing and the different uses sharing the one underground garage is, we're hearing, not tenable in today's market. So having a garage there that is open to the light and air and easily accessible for customers and employees is really important. But we understand the principles of the RDA. So what you're seeing here is that from the street, they're hidden, right? And there is some, when you look like anything from the side or whatnot, you may see glimpses of it. But overall, the intent in the plan you saw today is to cover the entire front, the entire facade that faces the building on the length.
Okay, thank you. It looked like that was happening in the west zone. In the south zone, it was a little unclear from the drawing. It also looked like the retail was less deep.
Yes.
So I would really encourage you to engage in conversations with our current landlords who are trying to fill spaces about the kinds of square footages retail is looking for, because we're looking to have more retail tenants selling things besides food.
Right.
And so, we want to make sure that we're accommodating the need to have a lot of diversity in offerings for downtown. And
If I could just,
sure.
One resource we have at our disposal that's very valuable is our sister companies. HBC owns Saks Fifth Avenue, we own Saks Off Fifth, we own the Hudson Bay stores in Canada. We have 10-some thousand employees in the retail business, and we feel confident that that space can be occupied and activated along that with a great many retailers other than food.
Okay. And just one last question. Can you, the drawing looks like there's going to be some changes to the facade of the Lord and Taylor building. So is it still, you're going to be maintaining the facade so that you'll see the columns and, it'll look like the building that exists there today, or will there be changes to it?
There will be some changes, some out of necessity and some out of tenant necessity. So the tenant that are coming here today are not going to be a department store, right? Or it would be a department store still. So we're going to have to modify the building. So one of the purposes of adaptive reuse is really the environmental benefits of that. One of the worst things for the environment is steel and concrete. So the fact that we would make steel and concrete, pouring concrete is terrible for the environment. So trying to maintain that also creates a much more sustainable building. But we're putting retail in that works for today in the front of the building in a big portion of it. In addition, today's office tenant, whether they're medical or commercial office, while they like history, they also want the building to look forward and be a place that represents their brand. So until we get that tenant finalized, it's hard to come up with exactly what that building is. But we want people to remember and look at that building and go, oh yeah, it used to be Lord & Taylor. Now whether that means columns or the brick or the stone, we'll have to work through with the town and our designers on how to achieve that. We're very proud of the building, but I can't say exactly what will be retained or not.
And I understand that we're not getting into those details tonight. I'm just trying to log some
Yes.
requests. And
I'm going to make one comment, and then I'm going to hand it over to Councilman Donald Gullett, because I don't know if I saw this in your presentation, but I think it would be a popular thing, is that you all are the owner of a liquor license.
Yes.
And the original intention was that the liquor license was going to go in the west zone.
Right.
But through these changes, determined to put the liquor license on the south zone. And for those that, maybe on the south side you're aware, there is no liquor license on the south side of town currently. Zero. And another thing you may not know is that one liquor license can operate multiple establishments if they're adjacent to each other and have the same property owner. So they could feasibly take their liquor license, put it along this retail frontage and operate and run 3 different types of establishments to operate dining and bars and restaurants to really truly activate the street. And that is, a great workaround for our archaic liquor license laws in town. But I think that's definitely worth mentioning, so.
Yeah, it was one of the early decisions, and if we were going to just take the building and divide it up into 3 retailers, right, then we wouldn't need it. But a liquor license came on the market early in the process, 3-4 years ago. They're not cheap, and we invested in one and bought it. And it's important. Originally, it was absolutely considered to be at a restaurant at that location with the residential, et cetera. And as the plans have evolved, the place that seems obvious for us is on the town green in that office building as an amenity for the south side and to activate that as well as the office tenant there.
So Councilman Donald Gullett, you have a question?
Yes, my question was, let's say post-completion of this project, and as an example of any other projects that you've completed, is there a turnover rate in ownership of those properties, and what is the time frame that happens in?
Yeah, it varies, and it varies in the industry, and it varies for us. Obviously, if we bring in anyone during the construction process, it's subject to town approval. Your experts can speak to that more. Typically, you get a property completed and stabilized, which means all the tenants are in, residents are in, they're paying rent. You're at the place where you think it's going to be stable for a while. And that is one place where it could be sold, right? Sometimes it's held for a while if you believe the values you've created is coming up, and sometimes there's a second turn of tenants that you believe will create more value, and you wait for that and hold on to that. We're a little different because we are at times opportunistic, but we own, I think, 20 or so million square feet around North America. So we may choose to hold things for the long term. We've owned property for 15 years. We've owned property for 353 years. So we do everything in between.
When you do your traffic impact analysis for the amended plan, will you consider the specific characteristics of the urgent care? And what I mean by that is, it seems to me that urgent care is unique in the sense that you're going to get a lot of people coming in and out. you know, all day. I don't know how late it'll be open, but it could be, you know, going on for some time, as opposed to like an office where guy checks in, he works, he goes home. So will that be taken into consideration?
Yes, I'd have to remember if there's a specific ITC, which is the International Traffic Guidebook for urgent care. I believe there is, but yeah, similar to food and beverage being different than traditional retail.
Okay.
Thank you. So I think if I remember correctly, it was this is a 25% reduction in the overall plan, give or take?
Yeah.
Of that 25%, what percent of that reduction is from the elimination of the underground parking garages?
None. The reduction is based on the occupied space that counts towards the town's FAR, the town's overall, how they calculate square footage for zoning.
Got it. So it's not included in that number?
Not the parking, no.
Got it. Thank you.
The total number of spaces for the project have come down. I don't know the square footage.
I have a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
The first
Nobody
is
else?
following up regarding the parking.
Yes.
The underground parking. I guess your experts felt that they couldn't dig below ground in those areas, even though like a couple blocks, I think the Sophia is doing underground parking. So just curious why 2 blocks away, underground parking couldn't be placed.
It's not impossible, but it's different uses, right? Residential has a much less parking demand than office. So putting parking below grade under a single building that's by itself, I guess they found more feasible. But for the parking for our tenant and tenants that we're looking at, that are looking for not only the proximity, but how it feels to their customer and their employees, they absolutely prefer it over there. And it's what you're seeing predominantly still being built like it in other locations.
And my second question is follow up to Councilman Kiefer's from the beginning, his first question. This would go to the legal counsel. Did the original agreement require written notification for changing the redevelopment plan? And if so, why was not written notification provided?
Yeah, the agreement provides a process by which they independently could trigger an obligation for this council to consider. They chose not to do that approach, which was more collegial, which is work with us, work with our professionals, we work with yours, and then we can present them something collectively. Again, as Doug said, this started back in the summer. If they exercise their right under the contract to write and submit a written request, we'd be before you on what they requested back then, and the very high likelihood is you wouldn't get us up here recommending it. So they thought it would be a better approach, and we agreed that working with professionals to present something that we were proud to present was the better approach.
I have a question for Chris, so Doug doesn't get all the fun. Chris, can you just talk a little bit about the requirements, building on Councilman Hapgood's comments, just about the screening of the garage on South Avenue? Like, what are we specifically requesting? How many what's the height of that retail?
Yep.
Et cetera?
Sure. So I mentioned during my presentation that we have this term that's defined in the redevelopment plan. It's called a mixed-use parking structure. I'll pull up the definition for all of us. So a mixed-use parking structure, a structure comprised of retail or restaurant bar uses and one or more uses used primarily for the parking of storage of motor vehicles. Retail and or restaurant bar uses shall be included on the ground floor. Now what you've seen in their plan is sort of a double height, similar to, if you recall, the way the office was designed the last time, sort of double height up front. So that's sort of like an expanded version of the ground floor. We have a separate section, which you'll find in the sort of design standards section of the plan, where we talk a little bit about the breadth of that. So the requirement is that the retail or restaurant use extend the length of the garage. One of the things, frankly, that we went back and forth with quite a bit was how much of the garage would have retail and restaurant, and it was really, I think, critical from our perspective to make sure that that extended the whole length, so we've written that requirement into the plan.
Does it require them to do that extended height, or that's an option?
I don't think that part is required. I will say that if you do get to a redevelopment agreement, there's sort of those much more detailed sets of drawings that go with that, and we should certainly make sure that that double height ends up in those drawings.
Got it, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Should we move on to any more questions before we move to public comment and so forth? Anybody else? Okay. So we'll just move on to the agenda. Thank you all very, very much for those presentations and for being here. It's very, very helpful. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for the Town Council Conference and regular meetings of October 8, 2024? So moved by Councilman Healy. Second? Second by Councilman Contract. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? This motion is carried. Ms. Lashy, do we have any petitions or communications?
Yes, Mayor, on October 21st at 11:57 p.m., the members of the Town Council and I received communication from the Westfield advocates expressing their disagreement with General Ordinance 2024-24, which is on the agenda tonight for introduction. A copy of that email and a 38-page attachment has been distributed to all council members.
Thank you. Now it's time for open discussion by citizens. Anyone may come up to the microphone and speak to the council on any subject on which we have jurisdiction. Please state your name and address for the record, and please limit your comment to 5 minutes.
Stephen Goodman, 322 Orinda Circle, Westfield. Thank you, Councilman and Mayor. I did attend the early 7 p.m. council meeting. I was privy to a lively discussion amongst the council members and mayors and Jim Galdea and the lawyer regarding protocol. Transparency, or the appearance of such, starts with proper process and protocol. It continues with information dissemination and discussion, not just to committee members, but to the rest of the council and the public. The problem today is what that process is, and is it the same for all projects? Or should this process be amended for some more extensive or expensive projects, such as amending the plans for 1 Westfield Place? The timing, or better, the timeline for discussion, dissemination of this information, and public feedback that has been given for this change is not sufficient. Hence, the apparent lack of transparency. The public cannot even ask questions until the night of the vote of the council, and therefore, this is somewhat flawed. I ask that you change the protocol for some of these projects so you expand it to the public before taking it into committee and making a decision. Thank you.
Good evening, Carla Bonacci, 603 Lawrence Avenue. Since its inception 2 years ago, Westfield Advocates has clearly and consistently communicated that this 1 Westfield Place project is too big, too much for this town. Nothing we have heard tonight from Topology, Chris Coley, Doug Adams, or Ann Lando from HBC, or gleaned from reading the revised redevelopment plan since Sunday, barely 72 hours, has changed our very first public statements 2 years ago, quote, that the town and developers' process for incorporating public input and effectuating project revisions will again be a vacuous form over actual substance. This is from our letter to the editor, November 16, 2022. We also said that in business, we know that the first offer is rarely the best offer, but the town has not seemed willing to seek alternate proposals or negotiate a better deal for Westfield's residents. What our assessment so far is that the revised physical plan changes appear dramatic, need time for evaluation, and the financial terms, if anything, are worse for the town. Once we are able to obtain all the financial information necessary, we should have a more specific assessment of the financial return on a risk-adjusted basis. The comparison is between the original and revised OWP plans, as well as the opportunity cost to the community and the public. Even Chris Coley might agree that an above-grade parking garage, whether it's covered by a one-floor mixed-use retail to serve office tenants, is not the optimal use for this south lot location at this major transit link. We say again that the selling of the public town lots without an evaluation of alternative proposals and community input is an extreme approach that must not be motivated to seek out and attain the best development plan and result for this town's foreseeable future. What gets built is not easily unbuilt. We have also said this regarding the upcoming affordable housing plan, that both processes need to be deliberative and inform each other with a comprehensive master plan vision for this town that maintains our finances, neighborhood character, and quality of life. Westfield advocates cannot support this revision, and we urge all the council members to take a fresh look in the current context and not validate this amended project. And I would also suggest, if you looked at other uses instead of office over on the west zone, you could add more residential, since there doesn't seem to be an office market. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oops, I think Mrs. Goodman. Mrs. Goodman, I think she would. Yeah, sorry.
Susan Goodman, 322 Arenda Circle. I have several questions. I know they won't be answered, but I want to put them out there so the residents can hear. I still go out there and I talk to 70% of the residents that never liked this project to begin with and are not going to be happy with the revisions. My first question is, why did the visitor center close when, even though supposedly their lease was up, they knew they were going to be making these changes? That visitor center should have been demanded to stay open by the town, a new model to be made, and for residents to have several months to go down there and engage with the developer on the changes that were being made. Number two, 2.5 weeks ago, we received our tax bill with the typical propaganda fluff insert that's in there. And yes, it is, because when you go to the supermarket, your friends come up to you and say, "Did you get the tax bill with the propaganda fluff statement?" There was a whole section about the maze, but nothing about this that was coming down. Now, according to a message that Mayor Brindle sent to neighbors and friends this afternoon, there was conversation about this since the spring. Why then shouldn't there have been an insert in our tax bill telling us that the developer wanted to make revisions on the original development and that we will have a chance as residents to have an engagement with the developer and the town to see if the revision is really what we wanted? But no, we didn't get that. Then yesterday, I get an email from Linda Habgood. Now this email says, "Tomorrow night is the first legislative step in the council considering the requested changes to the plan and agreements. And then we will spend the next 2 months considering and looking at the details, hearing residents' views, and voting." Well, now Topology put up on there that we're going to pass this through the planning board, and on November 12th, 3 weeks from now, we're going to vote. Where's the 2 months? Where's the public engagement? Where's the visitor center so we can go down there and see what this is instead of 100 pages this thick that most people don't even have time to go through? And most of our councilmen didn't even get to the last minute. This has been in works for months, and we, the property owners the taxpayers that pay the town's bills behind the scenes with our money, we are disregarded. We are inconsidered. You decide what you're going to want for our town, and we have no choice to say anything. Most of us don't want it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have flipped 4 seats. This is hocus pocus. It's Halloween. It's another thing that you're presenting. We want to have a conversation about this. We want to know more of what's going on. You had no right to pull this and then close the visitor center. And you had no right not to clue us in that this was coming down. This is the biggest development that the history of Westfield has ever had. It will change our town totally. And then the 16 units that you're taking from age restricted, oh, that's what we wanted. We wanted age restricted all downtown so that all of us old people could sell our houses and move downtown and walk everywhere and not drive our cars, and then we won't have the clogged up traffic. Well, now you're going to have 16 families move in, and everyone's going to have probably 1 to 3 children. And they're going to go to our schools that you promised we're not going to stress anymore with increased pupils, and it will. We already have a difficulty with taxes being raised constantly about the schools. And now a referendum coming down in April take out a big bond to get a full day in kindergarten and everything. So now you're changing the plans. Now we're going to have more traffic because those families are going to have cars. They might even have 2 cars because they're going to have to drive their children all over. No one's going to be walking to town like the age-restricted people. So I think you should slow up, not push this thing back through the way you're having to do it. You should open up that visitor center or even just take a room here in the municipal building where they have activities and have a couple of sessions where the residents could come down and hear it for themselves directly from you. What is coming down? Why you made the changes? This is a lot to absorb in one night. And then in 3 weeks, you want to change our town.
I'm sorry, Ms. Goodwin, your time is up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, Drew Kellerman, 534 Boulevard. I'm going to be a little calmer than the last speaker. Decorum. So here we go again with the same process cry, the same cry made in the lawsuit by the same people making the same claims tonight. That lawsuit was dismissed by the courts, I'll remind you. Here's the reality about the public process performed by the town of Westfield. The judge in the lawsuit confirmed that, and I quote, "The town of Westfield governing body was not arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable and was appropriately and adequately supported by the record." This new council and the Westfield advocates claimed they wanted a smaller project. Well, here you go. Here's the smaller project, exactly what you wanted. So I'm a little confused as to why this is no good either. That doesn't really make sense to me. But instead of being appreciative, they'd rather play politics and seemingly would prefer to keep the larger project because that's what's frankly going to happen if this amendment isn't voted in. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Brindle, members of the council. My name is Sharon Stockwell. I live at 100 Nelson Place. My husband and I live in Ward 1, District 1. We purchased our home 22 years ago. We are in the first neighborhood that is adjacent to the Lord and Taylor building. When we purchased the house 22 years ago, one of the selling points that the real estate agent pointed out to us is that we could throw a quarter and hit the side of the Lord and Taylor building. So I don't think he was as excited about that as I was. So this has been our neighborhood for 22 years. As you can imagine, living so close to downtown, different types of projects, different kinds of issues come and go. We have a lot of stress at times within our neighborhood because we are surrounded by parking, schools, daycares, the why. But this is something that I see as very positive. This is something that I feel is going to enhance and improve my neighborhood. And being so close to downtown, when something is an improvement, it's something that's very much appreciated. So I like the original plan as well, but I'm very happy to see that you have compromised, that you have made adjustments, that you have listened to the residents, that you have listened to potential renters for the office buildings, and that you've looked at this in a really comprehensive way. And you've made the changes and you've made the adjustments that people have asked for. So I too am confused why the project that is being reduced by 25% is still being met with concern and skepticism. I appreciate all of the things that you have done. I can't even imagine all of the hours and all of the manpower that each and every one of you have put into this project and also into the changes of this project. I thank you very much for all of your time, for all of your efforts, and I look forward to reading all of this information again. It is a lot, to look at, and I'm looking forward to understanding it more and looking at what the process is and following through with what that process is. And I thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Denise Sherwood, 642 Hanford Place. I'm really not here to ask a question. I'm here to show my disappointment for how the information for today's meeting came about. I was at the pre-council meeting, and it was somewhat heated, I guess. I come to find out that at the Finance Committee meeting, which was October 10th, if I'm not mistaken, in the evening at 6:30, there were members there, 2 that were for moving this forward, and I think a couple that were not for moving this forward. But from what we understand from the town administrator, irregardless, it gets brought to the meeting tonight. My concern is, from what I understand, is that, I think Dave Keeper, you mentioned, you were told that you could not share what went on in the Finance Committee meeting with any of your fellow council persons that were not at the meeting. Is that true? Or, no? I'm just trying to understand it. My understanding was that you couldn't talk to the residents about it. I'm sorry. You couldn't talk to the residents about it until it was published on Sunday on the agenda. And I just think, so we had between Sunday and when we got the red line version around mid-afternoon on Monday to take a look at that to see what was going on. And I just don't know why there was, it just doesn't seem very forthcoming, and it just doesn't seem like a lot of you were involved. And I hear today that you guys met with HBC in April, and then there wasn't, it seems, any discussion until October 12th, and now the residents are finding out on Sunday that there's an amended plan. And as far as people saying, oh, we should be happy with a 25% reduction, it's not the overall project. I think people were, I personally was upset that our transit lots, most towns don't own their transit lots. We do, we're fortunate. And we gave we offered in a no-bid contract to HBC the opportunity to buy our south train station lot. That's my concern. Lord and Taylor, okay. Lord and Taylor's parking lots across the street, that's another thing. It's all the development going on the south side, that's an issue to me. So if you reduce everything overall by 25%, that still doesn't sit well with me because the big issue was what was going on South Avenue. So those are my concerns. Thank you for your time.
Bob McNamara, 603 Lawrence Avenue. Picking up on what Denise had said, our issue is really about the South Street lots, and in essence, the selling of our parking lots to the developer, and then what that means. Our issue has always also been that then, because we sell that, we squeeze the public parking garages into very tight spaces, sites, causing those garages to be inefficient and more expensive. Even the town's own parking consultant, THA, acknowledged that in a meeting. We, the taxpayers, are footing that bill for an inefficient parking garages that we're squeezed into. Compare that to the private parking garages that Streetworks tenants will now occupy. When you look at that, the difference is stark, and we are really getting the short straw relative to that. Regarding the north side public parking garage, its egress remains problematic. As anyone who has traveled along North Avenue during rush hour, this design exacerbates that by obligating all of the commuter cars to funnel onto North Avenue, so close to the Central Avenue intersection. I also wanted to talk about what is most disturbing, which is the lack of transparency and process and not following the agreement. As Mr. Adams acknowledged, no written detailed statement was submitted in accordance with Section 3.7 of the agreement. The lawyers on the town council should wince when they hear a lawyer says they wanted to make it congenial. Also, as far as I know, nothing has been submitted to the review committee. That's in Section 4.19. A review committee was established. Streetworks was supposed to provide a monthly report on their leasing. To date, I've never seen that report. I don't think it exists, and I don't even know if the review committee even meets. We haven't heard anything. Again, the idea of lack of transparency. We have a review committee, and we hear nothing from that committee. Relative to the residential units, as the mayor mentioned, round 4 obligates new developments to be 20% affordable. As this agreement is being amended, I would have hoped that the town pushed the redeveloper to provide the 20%, not 15%. In addition, while this amendment has not been approved to move to the planning board, there are discrepancies between topology's presentation and Streetworks' presentation. The central building, for instance, is 3 stories and 55 feet, according to topology, not 2 stories and 36 feet as presented by Streetworks. The west building is actually closer to the single-story houses on the 4th floor. They fail to mention that the step backs were eliminated at that side of the building. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening, I'm John Marcos, 543 Arlington Avenue. I have several comments. Number one is the original plan was deeply flawed, and the amendments are not good enough. Second of all, 3 weeks is not enough time between tonight and voting on this plan, yes or no. Third of all, the plan and the financials should be considered together and should be voted upon together. It is not prudent to vote on the plan without going through the financials and having a thorough bipartisan review of the financials, unlike the last time using that financial advisor. Now, as far as the commuters are concerned, this is still a bad plan. One for one, not good enough. There's population growth, there's one-seat ride, just not good enough. Commuters are being stuck with garages which are less efficient, more time-consuming, and more expensive. The traffic flow for the garages and for the stations are simply inadequate. They should be reviewed by the police and by independent traffic experts, because you're putting all the traffic and pedestrians into two very small areas. You're hiding the South Side train station. And finally, who is the guarantor? Is it Hudson Bay? Is it some small LLC? And what happens if that LLC declares bankruptcy? There are lots of flaws, and we need an independent financial review that's bipartisan and not the process that took place several years ago, because the taxpayers deserve thorough reviews, and the plan or the amendments and the financials should be done, voted upon, and considered at the same time. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Carey, 408 East Dudley Avenue. I'm probably going to reiterate several things that people have already said. First of all, Westfield Advocates represents many people in this community. It's not a small group, and I want to reiterate that we are representing people in this community. Regarding some of the changes that were made, Mr. Adams, I find it implausible and almost laughable that you took people's feedback into consideration. This was shoved down our throat a year and a half ago. And you're coming back a year and a half later telling us you've taken feedback into consideration.
Ms. Carey, with all due respect, can you direct your comments to the council, please?
Okay. Additionally, there's been no discussion about changing marking conditions. It's just all about resident feedback, which was completely ignored last year. Traffic studies, independent traffic studies, parking assessments, concerns about office buildings were all ignored a year and a half ago. Regarding financials, half of you remember this. We presented this. This is over 25 questions about the financials for One Westfield Place that were given to us and provided by financial professionals in this town. Residential commercial developers, finance professionals. These were compiled and were presented to this council multiple times, emailed. About 70% are still not answered. So once again, we've got 3 weeks to go through the financials that have completely changed. You talk about transparency and due process. It's not being followed. Okay, you're doing the minimum. And if you think it's right to give this town, once again, it's the same playbook from a year and a half ago, to give this town 3 weeks to digest all the changes. Above ground parking structure on the south side parking lot, I think that's been debated for over 30 years in this town. It's tied up and ready to go. Nobody's been told about it. Nobody's had a chance to discuss it. And here we go again. So again, I'm asking this council to please give the town more time. We went through this last time. Would appreciate with this final rendition, you let us have more time. And lastly, I don't appreciate you berating one of the council members because he's asking questions on behalf of his constituents. That's part of his job, okay? And to question the professionals who are representing us and who are giving you advice, that's part of your job, to not blindly follow exactly what they're saying. So I appreciate the questions, Councilman Armento and all of you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sally Cohen Alamino. I live at 241 Hazel Avenue. I've lived here for 28 years. I am not going to listen to the mayor, and I am going to say thank you to the experts. Thank you very much. I know what I don't know. I don't you all represent a large group of vocations, but I don't think any of you all know as much as they all know. I am horrified. I've come before you guys before to say, horrified by the division in this town over this issue. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We come together beautifully when there's some horrible thing that happens in this town. God forbid there's a car accident. God forbid there's a house fire. We are incredible then. This is not incredible. I don't understand the anger that I see you shaking your head at me. You were the one that was up here screaming at the mayor.
Salamino, just direct your
I'm
comments.
sorry, I don't understand it. I think we should all do better.
Oh, sorry. Hold applause, please. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Oh, I hear one more.
Dave Vecca, 222 Midwood Place. Thank you guys for coming out tonight, dedicating your time. Thank you for the improvements to the neighborhoods, four-way stop sign at Boulevard. David and Mike, thank you guys. I'm sure you guys were a part of that conversation at least. Wild stuff, right? I think I came out here about a year and a half ago for the first time to ever participate in town politics. Not enough time. You guys asked for a red line document. There was a lot of nasty comments online. The town wouldn't produce it. The town produced the red line documents. After I compared the documents side by side, you could have saved me some time, but take what we get. I don't know what it would take for you all to feel satisfied, for everyone behind me to feel satisfied. I'm not sure that's a bar that can be cleared. But I think it's disingenuous and unfair to the professionals to sit there and say that they haven't actually addressed community feedback. They've worked on this for a year. Presumably, they actually addressed and studied things, found information out, went to the market, weighed that against community feedback, and came back with a new plan that's 25% smaller. That's a ridiculously large reduction. I liked the original plan, obviously. Everyone who's here knows that. The new plan's still strong. It's better than not having it at all. I don't know what it would take to get a consensus development in Westfield, but someone said it's the biggest development Westfield's ever had. It's the only development Westfield's ever had. It's the only one. All the other ones have been residences that have effectively been forced onto us. So, thank you guys for the work you do, working together, coming together. I know that the committee has 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I know that you guys worked closely with Streetworks and HBC. HBC, thank you for continuing to work with the town. Council, thank you for your time and the improvements to the neighborhoods. I do genuinely appreciate it. I hope we don't have to keep coming back. I got 3 young kids, I'm very tired. Thank you all.
Thank you.
John Adwar, 426 Birch Place. I'll be brief because it's way after 10 o'clock. I just want to say, like Dave before me, my wife and I are raising young children in this town. We are excited about this town. We are excited about change. We're not afraid of change. We are raising children and we want we're excited about development. We're thrilled about streetscape improvements. Thrilled about the beautiful renderings of what our downtown is going to look like as our children get older and maybe they have children a generation from now. We would be thrilled we don't need more time. We think we're ready by December. We hope that the vote goes through and that shovels are in the ground the next morning.
Thank you.
Hi, Carrie Murphy, 502 Cotting Road. I just wanted to, I can't remember what his name was, but the guy who was up here right before the person here. There are actually quite a few developments going on in town, which leads me to the first thing I'm going to ask again, which I've been asking for the last 2 years, a map of the developments so people know where they all are. He would then know that we have the crossings, we have the development by Williams Nursery, we have the Sophia that's going to be coming, we have the developments on North Avenue. There are about, what, 12, is it 12? 13 maybe developments. I like to call them overdevelopments because we're overdeveloping our town. If we could, I'm asking again, if there's a newspaper here, please, I'm asking for there to be a map of where all the developments are in our town so people are aware of what is coming, where the traffic will be, where the, you know, it's ridiculous that we don't know where all these developments are. And that's a good case in point. He doesn't know of any other developments. There's a lot of them. Anyway, this is my time. Thank you. I'm also going to come up here and ask you if, I know you're all on social media. I know you're all on Facebook. Mayor, I love getting your updates about Adams Fest. Awesome. Love that we have it in our town. Please use it to share with the residents things like this that are coming up. People love to hear about the fun things happening in town, no doubt. But you know what? They want to hear about the really important stuff too, so that they can have some feedback and they can get more involved. It's really, really hard unless you're solely focused on trying to, you know, find out information or, you know, people share information. Most people are going about their daily lives with their kids and everything else, and they're not really paying attention. So if you could use your social media platforms to inform them of these kinds of things, you know, the changes that are happening here, the development, I mean, let's just get beyond the fun stuff and get to the heart of some stuff that's really important too. The other question I had was in regard to the pop-up shop that was, the One Westfield Place pop-up shop in town that's now shut down. It was my understanding that that was going to be around for a few years, that it was going to go through at least the first phase or something like that in case people had questions or, you know, there were updates to the plans like this, but there's no pop-up shop now. So I guess to understand why there isn't one there now, when the expectation, I think, was set early on that there would be one for several years. It was kind of, you know, taken down quicker than, you know, the Grinch took away Christmas from Whoville. But so anything we could do with that would be great too. And just, you know, I was in that session earlier today about the process, and it seems odd to me that the council gets 2 weeks to go back and forth and talk about these changes, and then you share it with, you know, at this meeting, I guess it's approved to go ahead and start sharing it with people, but then the residents only get, or you guys only get like 2 or 3 weeks to share with tens of thousands of residents about what's going on. So collectively, like 12 people get 2 weeks to discuss it, but you hardly get any time to share it with us and get our feedback. I don't understand that. So I feel this whole thing is being entirely rushed. I don't understand why. I'm sure there's a reason, I just don't understand why. But I don't think that it should be. I think you owe us more. I think, you know, you've got a great town. The people are really supportive for the most part of you. And just, you know, shows the same respect that people are showing you. It would be nice.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, I close this portion of the meeting. You know, I took notes. I mean, there's a consistent theme, it seems, about process, and I'm just going to go back to what we discussed earlier. And this process is laid out legislatively. There's an ordinance process for a reason. This is the way every ordinance gets introduced. We actually have an extra week, as we said, between ordinance introduction and adoption. And we feel very confident in this process. And it is true that there was a meeting in April with Streetworks and everybody up on this dais. I want to reiterate, when you're claiming like we knew about this so long, to my comments of February 27th from this dais, When I responded to the litigation, the result from the resounding support of the judge and defeat of the Westfield Advocates case. And you wonder, when you talk about review committee, there hasn't been anything to review because of the litigation that you yourself initiated. And so that absolutely put a pause in the process. We got the resounding support from the judge. It started moving forward. They were deep in tenant negotiations, mentioned this notion about some changes that could be made. We said, this could be an opportunity if we can make it all work. We have new councilmen, let everybody weigh in. They did. We handed it over to the experts, and here we are. And so I don't want to hear about lack of transparency, lack of understanding. This is, I know, listen, it's the same old playbook, so I know exactly what your response is going to be. Your response is going to be. So, excuse me. So, and this is exactly what I mean, I think, when we talk about respectful discussion. And I'll just comment on a few things before we move on. About the preview center. The preview center was always intended to be 2 years, always. We said that up front. It got through an approval process, and quite frankly, it was by the last 6 months, nobody was attending, even when there was open invitations and so forth. So basically, from a downtown economic development standpoint, we had a very big piece of retail, basically beautifully situated, but with nobody going in. We all agreed, including the landlord and the streetworks, that could be better purpose to actually do something that actually drives the local economy. So, and a reminder, this is an amendment. We are not introducing this process for the first time. And I'm sorry, if you look at the red line, it's not complicated. It's not complicated. Basically, you know what it says? Take every building height and shrink it. That's pretty much what it is in the red line. And so I think, so we feel really good and confident about the process and about what concerns and opportunities that this has addressed. And I'll just mention Mr. Marcos's comments about doing the plan and financials voted together. There's a sequential legislative requirement. You cannot do anything on any of those things until you have adopted amended redevelopment plan. So there's a sequence that has to happen that's driven by the legislature. And that's what we're following. And that's why we presented the financials tonight, because a criticism of the last time is that the financials were not presented at the time of the introduction of the RDP. So we intentionally moved up the financials tonight to be presented with the redevelopment plan so everybody had the full picture, and we're not voting on that for a few more weeks. So I just wanted to satisfy that. So with that, we're going to move on to the agenda. This is the legislative agenda tonight, and I'm going to ask Councilman Hapgood to move to bills and claims.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going
sorry,
to continue
please.
with our meeting now, so if you'd like to
If you want to
speak,
leave,
you
you want to
can go in the
leave, or
hallway.
you can stay. But if you're going to stay, please be respectful.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move bills and claims in the amount of $498,868.53.
May I have a second?
Second.
All right, Councilman Dardia, any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? This motion is carried. Next on the agenda is reports of standing committees, beginning with the Finance Policy Committee. Councilman Hapgood.
Thank you again, Mayor. I have 11 resolutions I'd like to move as a package. The first, a resolution authorizing the CFO to refund Recreation Department fees. Second, a resolution authorizing the CFO to refund Police Department fees. Third, a resolution authorizing the CFO to draw a warrant for the third quarter construction officials' state permit fees. Fourth, a resolution authorizing the CFO to draw a warrant to the Treasurer, State of New Jersey, for a burial permit fee. 5, a resolution authorizing the CFO to draw a warrant for Board of Adjustment escrow monies. 6, a resolution authorizing the tax collector to issue a duplicate tax sale certificate. 7, a resolution to award contract for the design plan of Tamaqua Park. 8, a resolution to award contract for the replacement of the pool filtration system at Memorial Pool. 9, a resolution to award contract for the parking management technology. 10, a resolution authorizing the town to submit a grant application for the Memorial Park shade structure. And 11, a resolution to approve the insertion of special items of revenue in the municipal budget for the National Opioid Settlement.
May I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Domagala. Any discussion?
Discussion.
Yes.
Yes, I want to discuss for a moment the major investment for the pool filtration system at the Memorial Pool. Memorial Pool took a tremendous amount of vision and a tremendous amount of foresight and a look into how this is going to fold out in the future. Believe it or not, the pool was quite controversial, and it was a very large piece of property. The first step was by a visionary Republican mayor by the name of Emerson Thomas. And he appointed a gentleman by the name of Hollis Plinton to be on the Recreation Commission. What was unusual about that? He was African American. He graduated from high school at Westfield High with my father in the 1930s. It was as a result of Hollis Plinton saying, you know, our kids, my community has nowhere to go to swim. Well, when the proposal was germinating, a lot of people said, well, there's lots of swimming pools. Mindawaskin, Nomahegan, Highland Swim Club, Willow Grove Swim Club, Manor Park Swim Club, I can name them all. But they didn't allow blacks, or Jews, or Italians. That's a fact. It seems foreign at this stage to say that. I happen to have the good fortune to be the first head lifeguard, swim teacher, swim coach, and adult swim lesson teacher in 1970 when the pool opened. It was very controversial, it was difficult. Could you actually have people from all backgrounds that didn't have to go through some kind of screening device to see who could be in the pool? Well, it worked. And for 54 years, that pool has been the most successful financial thing that's ever happened to Westfield. It's so popular, we just keep making improvements to keep it going. Again, I'll go back to the mayor that actually made this happen, a Republican by the name of Don Snyder. And their pictures are out there in the hallway. Just a visionary guy who wanted to get something done in spite of a lot of opposition, but it worked. It's similar to what we're trying to do with the downtown, and I appreciate there's a lot of controversy about it. Every single person here except that front row is not getting paid, includes all of us and all the people who are so interested enough to come out and speak their piece. But the investment into the Memorial Pool is well deserved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I
Councilman.
Can I bring up one other part of it? I thought that you and Councilman Kiefer had some really good information on the design plan for Tamaqua Park.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. I somehow missed that was in here. Yes, I'm sorry, Councilman. I wanted you to give an update because it's very exciting.
Sure, yeah, briefly. So people may remember that we're embarking on a bit of a process to look into upgrading Tamaqua Park and ways to do it. And we are hiring a design firm. They're called Dresdner Robin. And we talk about consensus. This is a great example of it. There was a very broad-based committee of which I sat on it. A lot of people from Recreation sat on it. A lot of stakeholders, including people who live near the park, were on it. And out of the 6 firms we interviewed, I think it was 6, maybe it was 5. It was 5. It was clear that everybody loved this firm the best. And I'm really excited about them. They get it. They understand the process that they're signing up for. They've built in adequate time in their schedule to hear from the public repeatedly and get the feedback. They are coming in with ideas, but not preconceived notions. They also said they want to approach what they quote light touch to the park to appreciate its natural beauty, which I appreciated. So very excited about these guys. The one thing I would just say is this is a long process, right? The design part will take some time, maybe 8 months or so. And then after that, of course, is a process to put things out to bid and construct and what have you. So please don't expect anything to happen soon, but it is underway. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Okay, all in favor?
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? This motion has carried.
I'd like now to move General Ordinance number 2024-24 on first reading, an ordinance adopting an amendment to the Lord and Taylor Train Station Redevelopment Plan.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Contracts. Any discussion?
Yes.
No comment.
You want to do this in an organized way, people, everyone else?
Sure, I mean, like, yes, Councilman Cooper.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll start with the positives of what I see on this amendment plan. The first is reduced heights of buildings, very good. Less office space, even better. The guarantee on the public, the guarantee on the debt service through the pilot. Matt, you still here? Great job, buddy. You made more proud on that. I think that's a great one. The negatives to me, though, all harken back to the core concept of the redevelopment plan. We still have 65-foot buildings. We still have on the north zone that parking garage, which I just think is going to be a disaster. So there's elements of it that still remain, and therefore I'm going to have to vote no. And the reason I vote no is because these core elements are still part of the amended plan. If I had an opportunity to vote in the original Westfield Place, I would have voted no as well. So all that said, though, revisiting those core elements, you may say that's wishful thinking at this point, but the reality is that One Westfield Place came to us, and they came to us because of economics and market conditions. And that's what drove this. It drove it because they can't get a tenant to fill all that commercial office space. So I would revisit respectfully some of the new concerns that we may have on this as a town. And I would revisit some of the core assumptions, but that's not on the table right now, so therefore I have to vote no. That being said, we do have 3 weeks before any kind of official vote on this ordinance, and I owe it to my constituents to keep an open mind, which I will do. I also owe it to them to keep them informed, which I will do my best to do. And so if people want to have their voices heard, I'm going to reach out and hear everything they have to say, and if somebody can change my mind, or a lot of people can change my mind, then so be it. Thank you.
All right, I guess I'm up. Even sitting here throughout this entire meeting, I've been conflicted internally about this. We asked for smaller size. We asked for smaller buildings, less tenants, range and rearrangement of the parking garages, and we both sit on the financial planning committee. It is very difficult, and my entire financial career, quite honestly, has been based in making some sort of deal somewhere. Buyers, sellers, find out what the market is, and see what you do. And as I was sitting here, I'm sorry to go ahead and pontificate, but nobody knows where I'm going. But I do have a particular issue along the way. So I looked at this kind of holistically from 15,000 feet, and I saw an event presented. I saw that event as being a project that was too large to begin with. The public got angry. There was a situation that everybody internalized the information. They picked a side. Economics at the same time potentially changed. There was a display of kindness, essentially a decrease in size, which I think made everybody feel good to some degree. And the question is whether or not that is really good enough. There were virtues provided in this project. I definitely can see them. I definitely see that there are concessions. The part that bothered me tonight, and only tonight, and influences my vote, was the evidence of a threat that if you don't do it, there's something bigger. And I can't use the word I'd like to use, but I'm ticked off about that. I think that's what bothers me the most, that you're sitting in this seat and you're making a decision, and you're talking about all of the great things that you could do, and 2 people tonight ended up saying that there was a threat associated with it. This is my opinion, and I think that's what set me off, because I was very, very close to understanding on how to go ahead and say I'm in the middle, I can accept certain things. There might have been 1 or 2 things on the table for me that I still would have pushed for and had conversations about. That's all I have to say. I'm sorry.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I don't see that as a threat. I just see it as a fact. It's just reality. And so I liked the old plan. I did. I thought that it was just fine and great for this town. But I like the new plan too. So that's why I'm voting for it.
I have a few things to say. as the chair of the finance committee, I should start with financial things first, I think. And I think it's very important to reiterate a point that David Kiefer made a couple of minutes ago about the backstop of the principal and interest payments for less bonding that come with this new plan. So despite some things that residents said earlier at the mic tonight, we're not at risk. We will be doing bonding to comply with the obligations that we have under this agreement, to put a couple of parking decks in place and work on some public improvements. But the repayment of those bonds comes from monies that will come through the pilot or be supported by the Streetworks Hudson Bay. And if they don't pay, because I think that also was a question that came up, we will be able to take all those properties back because we have a lien. So there's not a situation where we can come out behind. We come out ahead because there's, by estimates, these are not guaranteed, but by estimates, we'll get $157,900,000 in new revenue into the town's budget over the course of the next 30 years. And that is very hard. Those are monies that don't come easily to this town. We struggle over $50,000 increases in budget meetings every year, and I've been through 7 budgets. So when you're talking about millions, it's kind of hard to even imagine almost $160 million that we will have to spend on capital improvements that the town needs, and in the form of parks and fields and new sidewalks and other improvements that we can utilize for the benefit of the entire town. I think that the requested changes reflect everything that we've been hearing from the residents in terms of scaling back. And so I am very comfortable taking this next step to vote in favor of introducing this ordinance, which means that we will spend the next 3 weeks talking with residents who still have questions, and we'll be happy to answer any and all of them. And then there will be a couple more weeks before we finish out this process, again, taking feedback from residents. So I appreciate the fact that everyone came out tonight. It's now almost 11, it'll be 11 o'clock before we get out of here tonight. And I know that all of you had better things to do. So I appreciate your engagement, and keep coming back for the next couple of meetings, because we'll look forward to hearing more of your questions and comments.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I just have a couple things to say. I think it's really important that we have to go back to the beginning. Why are we even doing this? I think that's getting lost in this discussion tonight, and the mayor did mention it, but I think it's worth revisiting, because this project stemmed from one of the reasons why we all were voted into office 7 years ago, which is people were really worried about our downtown, because that is one of the crown jewels of this town. And it's one of the reasons why many of us moved here versus other communities that we could have moved to that have great schools, nice people, wonderful housing stock, tree-lined streets, etc. Think about why you moved to Westfield. It was really the downtown. Our downtown really distinguishes this town from others. And I know that was one of the big concerns when we first ran, right? So, when we think about some of the core objectives of this plan, preserve, strengthen the economic vitality of our downtown, diversify the tax base, improve the traffic, the safety. I have been on the finance committee for 6 years out of 7, sitting on the council. We barely can fund $3 million of public improvements, of capital every year. So when we're handed the opportunity to improve and make, I think, $42 million of improvements, virtually risk-free. I think Matt could say, I think it is risk-free to this town. That's an unbelievable achievement, right? So I think we just have to, I'd ask everybody to just step back and think about what is the real purpose of this? right? So that gets me to where we are tonight. I did support the original plan, and I liked it, but I shared a lot of feedback that I heard from residents that I actually had myself, which was, I was very concerned about traffic on South Avenue, right? I represent Ward 3, and that's adjacent to Ward 3. So actually, I'm very pleased with the changes, right? It's smaller, but I think it was a 36 to 40% reduction of traffic projected on South Avenue during peak hours. That's incredibly meaningful, but I like the other changes too, in terms of the liquor license moving to the south side, nice. Plus, retaining all the core elements of this, but scaling it all back. So to me, what's most important is this project as redefined delivers on the core benefits of why we even bothered in the first place, but I think really truly addresses the feedback that we've heard consistently, right? And that is what revision means, right? You revise something to make it better, right? I believe this project is better than it was before. I don't think this is an opportunity to throw it out. Thanks.
So first I'd like to say, going back to that meeting that I was at, I was at a meeting that supposedly was going to have some impact, but was not even told that I was having an impact at that meeting. It was basically just to go over the One Westfield 1 plans. So I beg to disagree with the mayor. There's transparency. No, there was not transparency. Again, we do pay the professionals to do it, but we're the town council. We should be appraised of things of what's going on, not 4 days before, there's a change in the redevelopment plan. That's not transparency. I'm sorry. Maybe that's the way government works. Maybe government needs to change. I sat in the audience for last year, and I watched how things were conducted. A lot of people in this town felt that this plan, the original plan, was not good. They had a lot of financial people come up saying it was a bad plan. A year later, now the plan has changed. Well, it could be because we were elected, could be you listen to the town people, or maybe really the economics of the times changed the plan, and now you're changing the plan, but to say we're appeasing the town. I can't prove that. I'm skeptical, a little cynical in my old age. I also, I'm not totally against it. I think the Lord and Taylor site is actually nice. You scaled it down. I have nothing against that. I think a lot of residents don't want a 65-foot office building on this train station. That's the reality of it. Or the 5-story parking garage. And yes, I know this is a redevelopment redo, not the whole project was passed a year and a half ago, much to the dismay of many residents. Councilman Contract indicated that they were voted in to do what they did. Well, you know what? We were voted in because there's bipartisan votes for us because people were not happy with what you did. It was not because they didn't want redevelopment, they didn't want this redevelopment. There was a lack of process, there was a lack of listening. If everyone was so concerned about listening to the residents, why a year and a half ago didn't we not stop? And instead of voting yes then, did you not say, okay, let's listen to the residents, the 2,300 people in the petition, hours that we sat out here and complained. Nobody listened. So I think that's disingenuous to say you listened. I think it's the economics of the time changed the project. That's the reality of it. I'm not pleased with the whole process, and therefore I can't vote yes.
Councilman Saunders?
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to address some of the things that the audience said, and I have a young family in town, have a 16-month-old daughter, and I'm looking forward to the redevelopment, change, and innovation in town, and I appreciate the sentiment around Westfield. We can't live on the way we've always been. If we want to get better, we have to continually innovate and come up with the times, and I totally appreciate that, and I'm with the folks that made that comment. And I think Councilman Contract made a lot of good points of the changes to this agreement are good. I think there's some really good parts of this agreement. There's some things I disagree with. There's some things I agree with. But when I make my decision for the vote tonight, I try to separate the subjective parts of this, right? The subjective parts of this are, do I like 65 feet or 55 feet? Do I like 100,000 square feet of office space or 200,000 square feet of office space? Do I like X amount of parking decks, Y size? To me, that's all subjective, and we're all entitled to different opinions there. What I try to focus on is what are the objective parts of this that I need to be true in order for me to be able to put a yes vote. When I look at the 3 objective parts of this, it gives me heartburn. The three things for me are: one, we sold our parking lots for $11 million based on a no bid process. And I just want to put that part in perspective for 1 second. Okay, thank you. I just want to put that in perspective for 1 second. I'm sure there's been a lot of RFPs. I'm just going to call out 2 RFPs we've done. We just did an RFP for Tamaqua Park, a project that is a fraction of the size. We did an RFP for the snack shop at the pool. So my first objective part of this is there is no way that we should do a no bid RFP process. Now, if an RFP came out and Streetworks gave the best RFP and we all agreed on it, we should take it. But I can't sit here and put my name on something when I don't know, did we have better offers from other developers willing to build other things? I can't sign my name to know that this was the best offer on the table. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I truly believe that 3 weeks is not enough to talk to residents. I'm just thinking about my own life personally. In the next 3 weeks, I could probably talk to, I don't know, 50 to 100 residents, and with a something this impactful. And listen, I think Streetworks said it right. There are major changes to this. Some great changes, some changes I disagree with, again, subjective, but there are major changes. I don't see why waiting 6 months and doing a slow, iterative process, and after 6 months, if we all agree and residents feel it's a good thing, then we should go ahead with it. But I really don't see the downside. I don't see the downside of just waiting 3 or 6 months to give us ample time with all of our busy schedules to get a little bit more feedback from residents. That's the minimum I could ask. And then the last kind of objective thing, quite honestly, like I know the mayor mentioned there's only a few changes here. For me, if I'm gonna sign my name to something and have my fiduciary duty, I wanna know that I've read through every little detail. I know we have experts, but my job is to question the experts. And to be frank, I heard about this really in earnest for the first time on Thursday night, last Thursday at 9 p.m. I got a lot of this documentation this weekend. The first time I saw financials was actually, revised financials was actually today on this 9-point printout that I haven't had a chance to digest, let alone I don't think any of us could digest this. I don't even think I've had enough time to go through it, get my questions answered, digest it, to confidently put a yes vote on the table. So again, I can't put my name on this, my fiduciary duty on this. I can't put the resident's name on this and put a yes vote forward. And then the last thing I'll say here is we're like applauding ourselves that we got a 25% reduction, and that's awesome. I just want you to consider the starting point we had. If I offer you guys $100,000 for your house, and then the next day I offer you $200,000 for your house, are you gonna applaud me and also tell me that I went up 100%? And that's what I feel we're doing here. We started a bad starting point. I don't care that it came down 25%. So with that, my vote will be no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. You know, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. There's different viewpoints. And obviously, we've had different viewpoints expressed tonight about whether this project should go forward or whether it shouldn't. Geez, I had a discussion at my 55th high school reunion in my backyard for the brunch on Sunday with one of my high school classmates who's here tonight objecting. And he found out I was kind of in favor of the program, but we're still friends. So we want to keep it that way, and I think Senator John Bramnick's really doing a good thing by emphasizing civility, because when we don't have that, we're in trouble. I look at this plan in complete connection with our obligation to have a constitutionally enforceable zoning law. Very much intertwined with that. You must, in order to have an enforceable zoning ordinance, you must have a proper accommodation for affordable housing, which means multi-family housing. Now, a lot of people have said, well, geez, what's going on in South Avenue? What's going on in North Avenue? That was initiated by Mayor Skibitsky, an excellent mayor, a Republican, with the help of Councilman James Forrest, another Republican, because they saw the builder's remedy as a threat to the town. The builder's remedy continues to be a threat to the town unless we have reasonable approach to multifamily housing. Where should that housing be? Should it be in the, by Franklin School? Should it be by Washington School, Jefferson School? You buy up 3 lots. You buy up 3 lots and you got a townhouse community of 20 people, 20 townhouses. Suppose the Westfield Advocates litigation, which they continue, it's in the appellate division now after being rejected by the trial court. Suppose they win. What could Hudson Bay do with that property? They could come to the town and say, we're building 10 stories and 500 apartments or 5,000 apartments because you don't have a zoning plan that meets constitutional requirements. This is a little bit complex, but it's not too complex. And I can sell in 2025 the concept that this plan allows for stability and relief from any possibility that a builder is going to come in and dictate what we do with any part of our property. In other words, I'd like to preserve the single-family zones around the town that are customarily and have been single-family zones. But we can only do that if we use the properties that we have on North Avenue, South Avenue, and in town, downtown, effectively. And I think this plan does that. And I might say, there's an old movie called The Verdict with Paul Newman. James Mason was the adversary. Paul Newman was a lawyer. He had a case he brought to the judge, and the judge was Miles O'Shea, the actor Miles O'Shea. And there was a settlement offer, and Newman didn't take it. And the judge says to him, when they give you the money, you won. When they reduce the size of the property or the size of the development by 25%, you won. You got what you wanted. The height reductions are coming down. That was the biggest thing I heard. The height is too high. And frankly, as a South Sider, lived all my life on the South Side, the South Side parking lot is an eyesore. It's a wasted resource, and we need to do something about it. This plan allows us to do something about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Healy. I actually really don't have much to add. I've always acted from the best interest and intention of this town, 100%. And I'm glad that Councilman Contract reminded us why we were so passionate about our downtown. When we first were elected, there's a Halloween store in our downtown. When there's a Halloween store in your downtown, that's not good. And we fundamentally went about knowing that we need to create a new ecosystem for our downtown in order to let these businesses thrive. Our businesses are filling up, but I can tell you there are many that are not thriving. And the reason they're not thriving is because it's much easier to get a business to come in. It's much harder to get a business to succeed. They are not thriving, many of them, because we do not have enough residents to support all the establishments that have come to town, especially these fast casual eateries. We just don't. And what you need people working and living in your downtown to support the businesses that we all love. And it can't be just Westfield residents. That's a fact. I'm very disappointed that this may go down on partisan lines. We tried really, really hard to actually get to a place that we thought could be something that everybody could rally around. I understand the positions that some of these guys are in. I don't really know, honestly, quite frankly, what more we can do. I don't think in some cases there's anything we could do to get the support of some of these residents and some of the councilmen up here. So we are just going to continue to be guided by our heart and our love for our community, and our initial intention was to do exactly what we've outlined at the beginning, and we're going to continue to do this. I think I'm incredibly proud of this plan. I was incredibly proud of the first one. I think this is an incredible win-win. I'm incredibly proud of our professionals who worked tirelessly to come to an agreement and advocate on the town's behalf. And I think a lot of that was expressed tonight. So with that, and I do want to remind everybody, this is just an introduction of an amendment. If this didn't pass, we would just you would revert back to keeping 75-foot buildings instead of 55-foot buildings. That's what the zoning would allow. So that's just a reminder of that's what this is. But I understand the reasons why some feel like they can't support that, but this is really about reducing the size and scope of what many of the folks in this room objected to. So with that, let's see, well, please call, did I do the second already? Did I do the second? Yes, okay, please call the roll. Councilmember Townsend?
Yes.
Dardia?
Yes.
Domagala?
No.
Cooper?
No.
Saunders?
No.
Armento?
No.
Contract?
Yes.
Healy? Yes. Mayor Brindle? Yes, this motion has carried. Councilman Healy, please move the Public Works Committee resolution.
I'd like to move a resolution authorizing the Union County Deer Management Program once again.
May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Contracts. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? This motion is carried. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Dardia, second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Saunders. Thank you all for being here tonight. All in favor?
Yes.
This motion is carried.